Chapter 7:15. I understand. Leave the matter of the city to me. Zhang Shouji solemnly said. Wang Chong nodded, a smile on his face. Raising his head to the sky, he saw several large blue birds unfurling their wings and flying over the city of steel. Recently, with Wang Chong's appearance, more and more birds had been flying over the city of steel to scout the area. Wang Chong shook his head, unconcerned. Faintly smiling, he began to head off to another location. Gallop. But not even Wang Chong noticed that while he was heading off, in the northern part of the city of steel, 5 or 6 li away, a fully armored horseman gave Wang Chong a profound glance, and then suddenly turned around and began to head northwest. It's time to report to Milord. The warhorse neighed, and the cavalryman with the distinct characteristics of the Hu left a trail of dust as he quickly vanished into the distance. They advanced along the official road leading to the western regions. After several hundred miles, the cavalry left the official road and turned into a magnificent dark golden hall. Qixi Protectorate. Raising his head, he could see a massive black plaque hanging high above the entrance to the dark golden hall. 5 words were clearly written on it. This was the famed Qixi Protectorate, the place that had repelled the Uzan to the east and the Western Turkic Khaganate to the west, the most crucial place in the path of the Tang dynasty to the western regions. Wang Chong had established a fief and a city in Wushang, and the closest one was the Qixi Protectorate. He clearly knows that Qixi is my territory, but he still dares to establish a fief and a city here. He truly is bolder than the heavens. It's only been a year. Does he really think that we've forgotten about the regional commander's incident? In the vast hall, a stalwart black figure sat upright on a hollowed-out metal throne like a crouching tiger or a coiled dragon, and his entire body emitted a powerful aura that was vast like the ocean. Foman Linta was the most powerful protector general in the northwest of the Tang dynasty. Although the Qixi Protectorate was not the front line, the Anxi Protectorate, Biting Protectorate, and Longshi's Big Dipper army were the most reliable and capable of providing timely reinforcements, whether it be the Anxi Protectorate, Biting Protectorate, or Longshi's Big Dipper army. Moreover, Fumeng Lingcha's existence allowed the 3 protectorates to avoid fighting on multiple fronts and being attacked from the front and rear. To put it simply, Foman Linta controlled an important throat. Because of this unique characteristic, not even Gao Xianji, Geshu Han, or Ansis Han, these influential great generals of the empire, dared to offend him. Moreover, Foman Linta was extremely old and experienced, and he had made his name long before Gao Xianji, Geshu Han, and Ansis Han. His prestige among the Hu was extremely high, similar to Zhang Shougue and Wang Zhongxi's status among the Han. Thus, when Foman Linta made his appeal, so many Hu generals had responded, submitting memorials to the regional commander's incident to have Wang Chong executed. But Foman Linta had never imagined that in just a year, this culprit had not only failed to flee far away from him, but had even dared to open a city right under his nose. This was no longer just audacity and impudence, but naked provocation and humiliation. Not even Geshu Han or Ansis Han would dare to act so impudently, but this was precisely what the youngest son of the Wang clan was doing. Milord, that youngest son of the Wang clan has just been made a marquis and has also been bestowed a courtesy name by the Son of Heaven. He's at the height of his success. Moreover, the fief was approved by the imperial court and the Holy Emperor. With these 2 swords of authority, it will be very difficult for us to do anything to him. In the hall, to Fumeng Lingcha's left, a burly Hu general spoke. Wang Chong's city was built at Wushang, only several hundred li from Qixi. The most unhappy were probably not protector generals and great generals like Foman Linta, but the Hu generals fighting on the border. Although the Holy Emperor had still passed the regional commander's incident, the time it would take to carry it out had been greatly reduced. Moreover, compared to the original contents, the authority and status of the regional commanders had been greatly reduced, and they could no longer be considered true regional commanders. Because of this matter, all the Hu generals on the border were gnashing their teeth, hating Wang Chong to the bone. This was because Wang Chong had not only harmed protector generals like Foman Linta, but also the path forward for all the Hu. After all, imperial great generals like Fomin Linta would have to abdicate sooner or later, and all the Hu generals would have a chance to take their place. All the Hu generals wanted to kill Wang Chang's appearance in Qixi, but the only problem was that the imperial court was a threshold they could not cross. Back then, I wasn't even afraid of the white-clothed Arabian Mokaha, so why would I be afraid of a brat who's still wet behind his ears? So what if he has a fief decree from the imperial court? So what if Wang Jiuling was once the prime minister of the Tang dynasty? Qixi is my territory. Do you think I can't take care of him? Fomin Linta sat boldly on his throne, his eyes exuding a cold and sharp light that chilled the bones. Then milord means, the general next to him widened his eyes and hurriedly asked. The construction of a city is time-consuming and exhausting. It'll take at least 2 or 3 years to complete. Even if his city of steel is fast, it'll still take 7 or 8 months. He's currently in the limelight, so I'll give him 2 months to focus on the construction. After 2 months, even if he's in the limelight, it'll be over. At that time, it'll be time for us to strike. Fomin Linta viciously glared at the general next to him. In addition, send a letter to Geshu Han and Nsis Hun. I'm sure that the 2 of them will be very interested in that brat. With these final words, Fomin Linta's eyes became extremely profound. Flap flap. A pigeon descended through the open window and into Big Dipper City. In an elegant and quiet study. The study was lined with bookshelves, and the shelves were piled high with scriptures, histories, biographies, collections, and some ancient books. A crane-shaped cauldron stood in the corner, exhaling a thick sandalwood fragrance that permeated the study, making the place seem ancient, quiet, and elegant. If one had not seen it with their own eyes, they would have found it very difficult to believe that a study like this could exist on the front lines of the empire, a place where wars were frequent. You've come. A gentle and dignified voice came from the room. An arm stretched out. The 5 fingers were slender and pure white, and at the same time, they contained boundless power. With a light pinch, a letter was extracted from the pigeon's leg. Upon opening the letter, there were only a few simple words: Wang Chong has arrived in Wushang. As expected. Geshu Han appeared unsurprised, and with a shake of his finger, the letter shattered and scattered onto the table. Lord Protector General, what should we do next? A deep voice came from behind Geshu Han. Around 3 paces away, a Big Dipper army general was standing there, waiting for some time. That Wang Chong is now the young marquis of the imperial court, and the entire world knows that the Son of Heaven has bestowed him a courtesy name. Do we really have to move against him? And from a certain perspective, that brat actually helped us out in the War of the Southwest. Do we really have to deal with him? What do you think? Geshu Han calmly replied without turning his head. Behind him, the Big Dipper army general was taken aback. He didn't expect Geshu Han to ask such a question. The Wang clan is currently in the limelight, and it has that relationship with the King of Song. It truly isn't wise to deal with them now. Moreover, that brat was too disrespectful to Lord Protector General in the regional commander's incident. Even now, our brothers still have some complaints about him. In addition, he could have built his fief anywhere, but he chose to build it in Wushang right under our noses. This is simply too disrespectful to milord. If we don't teach him a lesson, let alone milord, even our brothers won't be able to take it lying down. In addition, Qixis's Fomin Linta has also sent a letter to milord, hoping that we can work together with him to put some pressure on that Wang Chong. If we don't do anything, given how close we are, Fomin Linta will probably have some complaints about us as well. The Big Dipper army general said. Ha, it seems like you understand. Geshu Han put down the spring and autumn annals in his left hand and stood up from his desk. His back was ramrod straight, and invisible waves of energy roiled around him. An aura as vast as the mountains and seas exuded from his body. At this moment, Geshu Han was looking up to a lofty mountain. Even the general behind him had slightly lowered his head in respect. Wushang's geographical location is unique. How can it be that easy for him to build a city there and take advantage of it? Moreover, the War of the Southwest is for the empire, but the construction of Wushang is for private interests. These are two separate matters, so there's no need to worry. Besides, if he doesn't have the ability to establish a foothold in Wushang, we might actually be helping him by pressuring him a little. Isn't that a good thing as well? That way, he'll understand that the world isn't as easy as he thinks. Geshu Han indifferently said. Milord's words are reasonable. The bearded Big Dipper army general nodded obediently. However, his eyelids suddenly twitched, and as if recalling something, he hurriedly exclaimed, "That's right. But, milord, Wushang City isn't just his problem. He's also pulled in nearly 80% of the great clans of the capital. If we move now, we'll offend nearly all of them." Upon hearing those words, the Big Dipper army general frowned in deep melancholy. Meanwhile, the confident and carefree Geshu Han couldn't help but frown and fall silent. The study was eerily still. It had been some time since the construction of Wangchang's City of Steel began, but no one had made any major moves. It wasn't because of the Wang clan's influence and status, but because of the 80% of the great clans in the capital that Wang Chong had bound to his war chariot. In the many years that the Tang dynasty had developed, these great clans were no longer ordinary clans. Their influence extended deep into the court, the military, and the prefectures of the empire. They represented the strongest factions of the empire. Chapter 716. No matter how powerful the Wang clan was, it was just one clan. Moreover, as the Big Dipper Great General guarding the Longxi border, someone of Geshu Han's status really did not need to fear the Wang clan. At the very least, if someone of Geshu Han's status were to side with King Qi, the Wang clan would have a massive headache. But the great clans of the 8 cities of the capital, no one in the Tang dynasty would dare to believe that. Once 80% of the great clans rejected one would have no place to stand in the Tang dynasty. Not even Geshu Han dared to think about such a thing. This was also the reason why the great generals found the situation troublesome. Wang Chong had built a city in Wushang and had pulled in the great clans to endorse him, giving them a major problem. "Milord, milord," a voice at Geshu Han's ear brought him back to his senses. 2 months. Give them 2 months. Geshu Han half closed his eyes, but it only took a moment for them to return to normal. The great clans of the 8 cities of the capital were a massive force. Offending them for no reason was not a wise move. However, if he were the sort of person who would retreat in the face of difficulties, he would never have been able to oversee Longxi and sit on the position of Big Dipper Great General, much less block the millions of Uzun cavalry. Without that resolute and lofty character and his unflinching drive, he would never have been able to achieve his status as the god of death in the hearts of the fierce and valiant Uzun people. 2 months is the limit I've given them. This is a dispute between me and the Wang clan. In 2 months, those great clans of the capital should understand this point. At that time, they can't blame me. Geshu Han raised his head, his gaze looking past the open window, past the city walls, to the towering Uzun plateau. At this moment, his eyes were sharp and vicious. Neigh! The neighing of the warhorses resounded through the grassland. The construction of Wushang's City of Steel had attracted far more than just the Hu generals of the Great Tang. To the northwest of the City of Steel, 600 to 700 li away, the grass swayed, reaching the hooves of horses, and the crisp neighing of horses echoed far and wide. The eagle flies and the grass grows. It's another harvest season. A strange voice spoke in the language of the Western Turkic Khaganate. On the edge of this land, 2 muscular Turkic steeds were riding side by side. On the backs of these steeds were 2 Turkic men dressed in wolf pelts and brimming with a savage aura. From the snow-white fox furs around their necks, it was clear that they had significant status in the Western Turkic Khaganate. Yeah. The 8th great general of the Tang dynasty, the young Marquis, the disciple of the Son of Heaven of the Tang dynasty, the great Khan had already declared that no matter what, they had to find a way to keep him here. If we can kill him, it will be another season of harvest. The other Turkic nobleman next to the man agreed. Both of them had sharp eyes as they looked in the direction of the southwest. There, they could clearly see thick black smoke rising from the horizon, piercing through the clouds. Although they couldn't see anything, they knew that the place where the black smoke was rising was the city being built by the 8th great general of the Tang dynasty. Truly a pity. Such a young and promising star has fallen so quickly. The Turkic nobleman on the right clicked his tongue, but there was no pity on his face. On the contrary, there was a hint of cruel anticipation. If he hadn't killed so many of Meng Shizhao's people in the south, Meng Shizhao's crown prince wouldn't have secretly sent so much gold to the Khagan for his father's sake. If he was just passing by and came here to play, that would have been fine. But he just had to build a city here. Isn't that just seeking death? Even without the matter with Crown Prince Meng Shizhao, the Khagan wouldn't have let him off just because he built that city. Since he's seeking death, he can't blame anyone else. It seems that this person isn't as formidable as the rumors say. The Khagan has already sent word that the biting protectorate is no longer as strict as it was before. The taller Turkic man on the left, clearly of higher status, pressed his hand against the back of his horse. What does Nsishan want? Does this traitor who betrayed his own ancestors have some other scheme? The Turkic nobleman on the right said, his eyes twitching. He seemed rather uneasy at this news, but he was also filled with loathing. Foman Linta and Gao Xianji could be put aside, but Nsishan was a true Hu of pure Turkic blood. The Turks had the greatest understanding of other Turks. The Tang dynasty had used this method to defend against the Western Turkic Khaganate, and the Turks of both the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates loathed this method. In the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, Nsishan had long ago become their #1 target, and they had even dispatched Hu to assassinate him and poison him countless times. You're thinking too much. The Turkic leader on the left lightly pinched the eagle ring on his left finger and waved his hand, indicating that his comrade should relax. The biting protectorate's front line directly opposite the Khagan's tent is still as solid as ever. The only places that are truly relaxed are the southwest. This isn't the first time we've fought with biting, and everyone in the tent knows that Nsishan is pointing us in the right direction. At the start, the Great Khan and I didn't understand. But when we discovered that the new young Marquis of the Tang dynasty was building a city there, everything became clear. This Nsishan wants to use our hands to deal with his enemies. I heard that Nsishan had a sworn brother who was bullied in the capital of the Tang dynasty and almost died there. It seems that this was indeed the case. The people of the Tang dynasty love infighting, and even those traitors within it are the same. Isn't this my chance? The Turkic nobleman on the right said. After saying that, the two of them looked at each other and burst into laughter. Cree! Whoosh! Suddenly, a sharp whistle came from the sky. The two of them stopped laughing and raised their heads to look at the sky. High in the sky, beneath the blazing sun, a tiny black speck as small as a speck of dust was hanging there. This was a height that many birds could only dream of, and even arrows would find it difficult to reach. It's Foman Linta's rock eagle. He's truly cautious. The Turkic leader on the left sneered as he reached behind him and took a golden bow that was taller than a man. Knocking an arrow to the bow, he aimed at the black speck in the sky and fired. Twang! The earth rumbled. The arrow was like a bolt of lightning, instantly piercing through layers of space. It left behind a long white wave of air as it shot high into the sky. In the next moment, there was a mournful cry. High up in the sky, in a place that was more than twice the range of an ordinary arrow, a giant rock eagle was pierced through by an arrow. Then, along with the arrow, it exploded into pieces, leaving not a single feather behind. Let's go. The Turkic leader on the left looked up at the sky and sneered. He quickly turned around and called out to the Western Turkic nobleman beside him, and the two quickly vanished into the vast steppe. The tinkling of the bells drifted far Far away on the grassland, in Wushang in the northwest, Wang Chong was far from being the only guest. Behind him, wave after wave of people arrived at this place from thousands of miles away. These people included craftsmen, guards, and members of the great clans. Wang Chong. As Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji were patrolling the walls, a familiar voice came from the distance. A young woman, dressed in snow-white clothes and valiant and heroic bearing, was riding a large horse in Wang Chong's direction. Next to her was a budding woman, a red-tasseled spear on her back, her entire body as red as blood. She seemed like a blazing flame as she rode alongside her. Bai Siling. Zhao Yadong. Wang Chong's eyes flashed, a look of surprise on his face. Why have you come? Don't think that we can't find you just because you're hiding here. And don't forget, our Bai clan and Zhao clan both have a share in this city of steel. Can't we come to supervise the construction of the city? Bai Siling slightly tilted her head, her gaze on Wang Chong brimming with hostility. This. Marquis, I remember that I have some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave. Zhang Shouji felt that something was wrong and hurriedly left. You're leaving a little too quickly. Wang Chong stared in a daze at Zhang Shouji's back and bitterly smiled. Coming back to his senses, he began to walk toward Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong. Wang Chong naturally knew why the two of them had appeared here. When he had first sought help from Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong, the two of them had agreed without even thinking about it. The Bai and Zhao clans had believed that he had some grand plan, so they had given him their full support. But they had probably never imagined that he was only doing it to repair the road. Thus, once this matter was exposed, one could easily imagine why Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong had appeared. Did your clan make things difficult for you? Wang Chong jumped down from the wall and went to greet them. At least you have a little conscience. Now you finally know to ask. But since that's the case, why didn't you make it clear back at Tai-Bai Pavilion? Bai Siling dismounted, grabbed the reins, and led the horse forward. She gave Wang Chong a fierce glare. But even so, the pout in her eyes was far more coquettish than reproach. Zhao Yadong coldly watched from the side, but she was inwardly roaring with laughter. Wang Chong, you're not loyal at all. Siling and I were really screwed over by you this time. You were pretty smart, running to Wushang ahead of time. Siling and I couldn't run, so we were pestered by the clan elders for more than half a month. Zhao Yadong also walked over, leading her warhorse. It's my fault this time, so I've specially prepared 2 gifts for you as an apology. Shinan, bring them up. Wang Chong called out to the back and made a gesture. Yes, Marquis. A loud voice came from the distance. Chapter 717. Gift. Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong glanced at each other, speechless. It was clear that neither of them had expected Wang Chong to make such a move. Very soon, the two of them turned around and looked at the soldier who was carrying the 2 cages. Their eyes were filled with curiosity. Wang Chong had not given them a gift yet, so the two couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. The soldier quickly rushed over and placed the cages on the ground. These are Persian cats. The two pulled back the silk cloth and saw 2 furry and pure white creatures inside. Their eyes brightened and their faces lit up. Wang Chong had actually given them 2 of the most popular Arabian Persian cats in the capital. In the capital, from the princes and dukes of the imperial household to the nobility, all the women of the officials and the young ladies of the great clans loved the Arabian Persian cats the most. These Persian cats had docile and clingy personalities, making them extremely likable. As a result, they became the new favorites of the women of the officials and the young ladies of the wealthy clans. However, Arabia was tens of thousands of li from the capital, and Persian cats were far too precious to be tossed about. Thus, the majority of them died on the journey. As a result, there was no market for them in the capital, and a single cat was hard to find. And of all the Persian cats, the pure-colored Persian cats raised especially for the imperial household were the most respected and were known as the imperial Persian cats. The two Arabian Persian cats that Wang Chong had found for them were snow white without a single blemish. Their pupils were also very special, one deep blue and the other amber. With a single glance, one could not help but want to pull them into one's embrace. They were the most precious royal Persian cats. The two had only seen them once at Princess Ni Huang's place, and neither of them had expected Wang Chong to give them such a special gift. So cute. So pretty. Look, it's still using its paws to wash its face and scratch its beard. Yeah, look, it's actually licking my hand. Ha, it's so itchy. Both of their attention fell on the Persian cats in the cage. They squatted on the ground and kept playing with them. As for Wang Chong, he was momentarily forgotten by them. Although Bai Xiling and Xiao Yadong appeared valiant and heroic, and were known as heroines, different from the delicate women of the boudoir, they were still girls in the end. They also liked those furry and cute little pets. Wang Chong had done the right thing by catering to his needs. Fortunately, I made the right choice this time. Wang Chong smiled inwardly when he saw this. He had asked Yang Hongchang to bring these two Persian cats of the Arabian royal family from Talas. Yang Hongchang had operated on the Silk Road for many years and knew quite a few Arab merchants. Those Persian cats were very difficult for others to obtain, but they were no problem for Yang Hongchang. The Arabs were innately skilled merchants, and as long as the price was right, they could even obtain a royal Persian cat. That's right, Wang Chong, don't Persian cats die very easily? And they're not used to the climate of the Tang dynasty. Just how did you get them? A moment later, seemingly recalling something, Bai Xiling stood up with the white Persian cat in her arms and gazed at Wang Chong curiously. Give me 100,000 taels and I'll tell you the answer. Wang Chong teased. Bastard. Bai Xiling's eyebrows rose as she prepared to strike. Ha, alright, don't hit me. I'll tell you. Persian cats love cleanliness, so their cages must be cleaned promptly, and they have to be very clean. If they're not clean, they won't eat. In addition, they need to be occasionally squeezed out some grass juice. Wang Chong chuckled. Persian cats loved cleanliness even more than humans, and from a certain perspective, they were a sort of misophobe. Not many people knew about this, and the people who sold Persian cats were mostly greasy merchants who didn't take enough care of them. This was why so many Persian cats were dying. If they knew about this, it would be much easier to sell Persian cats. After settling the two cats, the guards from the two clans that Bai Xiling and Xiao Yadong had brought were also arranged to join the City of Steel's defense forces. On this trip to Wushang, Bai Xiling and Xiao Yadong had brought many experts from their clans. The combined forces of their two clans numbered more than 500. This was quite a powerful support. The Zhao and Bai clan's support for Wang Chong was self-evident. That's right, Wang Chong, you've prepared everything, so why didn't you put all your effort into building the city? Why did you build those buildings and inns instead? Bai Xiling couldn't help but ask after circling the city once. That's right, this city is too big. Such a large place is bound to take a lot of time and effort to build. How come you don't seem the least bit worried? Xiao Yadong chimed in. As the two strolled around with Wang Chong for so long, they gradually began to notice a strange phenomenon. Wang Chong's City of Steel had clearly slowed down after building the lowest foundation and the first floor. A large number of people had been sent into the city to build inns, restaurants, and tea houses for traveling merchants. This seemed very abnormal. Moreover, Wang Chong, as the master of this city, did not seem to be in the slightest bit worried. This made the two feel very strange. The two did not want to pressure Wang Chong, but there were times when they had to give an account to their clans. Moreover, the two had come this time to probe Wang Chong and also to see how the construction of the city was progressing. After all, the Zhao and Bai clans had invested a great deal of money into Wang Chong's City of Steel, paying a great price and blood. Ha! To do a good job, one must first sharpen his tools. Relax, the construction of this city will be completed much faster than you imagine. Wang Chong grinned. How could Bai Xiling and Zhao Yudong's thoughts be hidden from him? When the two spoke, their expressions were clearly distressed. They had clearly been forced. Everyone had their own difficulties, and it was already quite good that Bai Xiling and Zhao Yudong had helped him this far. Wang Chong naturally would not make things difficult for them. And you can tell your clans that the benefits the Zhao and Bai clans will obtain will be far greater than they imagined. In addition, this city will be completed in a month. Wang Chong said. Ah! Bai Xiling and Zhao Yudong stared in shock at Wang Chong. It wasn't that they didn't believe in Wang Chong, but that this city of steel was still an embryo, far from completion. Moreover, the construction of a city was time-consuming and laborious. It would already be quite impressive if it could be completed in a year. And Wang Chong's city was much larger than an ordinary city. Even though they were Wang Chong's closest friends, the two of them still felt that completing this city in a month was a fantasy. Wang Chong looked at their questioning gazes, a strange smile on his lips, but he did not reply. Facts spoke louder than words. In a month, the two of them would no longer think that he was exaggerating. Moreover, at that time, even Geshu Han and Foman Linta will be shocked. Wang Chong inwardly chuckled to himself as he gazed at the sky. The city of steel had been making such a huge ruckus, but Foman Linta, Geshu Han, Gao Xianji, and Sishan had still not made a move. They had only sent a few scouts to investigate, but they had done nothing else. This was rather abnormal. Wang Chong was well aware of what these great generals were planning, but alas, they would not have the chance. Time slowly passed, and 10 days later, the second batch of 50,000 craftsmen and experts from the great clans arrived to reinforce the city of steel. The second batch of components forged by the swordsmiths and sword shops of the various provinces of the Tang dynasty had all arrived. On the same night, once all the rock eagles, gerfalcons, eagles, and storks in the sky had dispersed, all the scouts lingering around the city of steel and the Arab and Karak Spazinu spies disguised as merchants had left, Wang Chong finally began his plan. Boom! In the darkness, the earth quaked. With Wang Chong's order, a blazing furnace spat out from the northeast corner of the city of steel, and then a second, a third, a fourth, tens of thousands of blazing furnace fires began to spread from the northeast corner of the city of steel to every corner of the city of steel. In the end, the blazing furnace fires illuminated the city of steel as if it were daytime. Begin. On the southern wall, Zhang Shouji stood shoulder to shoulder with Wang Chong, his expression grim. He swung down one arm, and boom! The heaven-shaking clattering of steel came from all around. All the 100,000 craftsmen and all the soldiers stationed around the city of steel stopped what they were doing and joined in the construction of the walls. From the moment Zhang Shouji had first arrived in Wushang, a sea of steel modules had already gathered around the city. After these modules had been used to construct the foundation of the city, they had not been touched. The majority of the craftsmen began to devote themselves to the construction of the restaurants, inns, and tea-houses in the city. But at this moment, as if it had been premeditated, all the craftsmen began to move the steel modules and began to collectively construct the city like ants. Clang! The first hammer fell, sending sparks flying and echoing far into the darkness. Tens of thousands of modules of the city of steel began to rise in the darkness. In this period of time, all the craftsmen had become familiar with the blueprints and construction methods, and now, all of this was beginning to show its power. Boom! 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 The clattering of steel shook the heavens, converging into a tide. In the light of the furnace, the tens of thousands of modules of the city of steel were neatly constructed like fish scales, following some sort of pattern. The nearly 100,000 craftsmen worked together like a single person, all of them working together like a massive and intricate machine, constructing the city with astonishing speed. On the wall, Bai Xiling and Zhao Yudong were left slack-jawed by this majestic and spectacular construction, as well as the formidable ability to coordinate and command. Impossible. Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong both came from great clans, extremely ancient clans with a long history. In terms of strength and resources, they far surpassed the great clans of the capital. With this background, one could easily imagine the breadth of knowledge and horizons of Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong. But not even Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong had ever seen such a majestic sight. More than 100,000 people working in uniform, even more organized than an army. This was unimaginable in the great clans. Chapter 719. Xiling, is what I'm seeing real? Zhao Yadong muttered, a deep shock in her eyes. I also want to ask you the same question. The shock in Bai Xiling's eyes was no less than Zhao Yadong's. As the two looked on, the tens of thousands of steel modules were neatly arranged. Amidst the flickering flames of the furnace, they were about to complete the 3-meter-tall first floor of the City of Steel. And not even 15 minutes had passed. This had completely overturned their understanding of civil engineering and city construction. Ready. Second team, get ready. Pour the molten iron. Hurry. Everyone else, get out of the way. Cranes. Begin construction of the modules. A series of shouts came from all over the city. More than 100,000 people were divided into nearly 1,000 groups. Each group was commanded by an experienced craftsman leader. They worked side by side, yet they were extremely orderly and coordinated with each other. Anyone who saw this scene would be deeply shocked. Because what was being displayed here was a concept and skill that far surpassed the level of this era in terms of city construction. In the darkness of the night, the City of Steel was bustling with activity, and no one knew what was going on outside of this place. Bai Xiling and Zhao Yadong stood on the walls, fierce winds howling over them. As they looked at the distant figures of Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji, a strange light flashed through their eyes. A focused man was the most charming. At this moment, Wang Chong stood motionless on the walls, his mind completely focused on the construction of the city. But that image of him devising strategies, of him giving orders, of him always having the overall situation in his grasp, had been deeply imprinted in the minds of the two, stirring their hearts. At this moment, the two of them felt that there was nothing in this world that Wang Chong could not do. I understand. In truth, he's been intentionally slowing down the construction in order to numb those people. Zhao Yadong's eyes rippled as she suddenly spoke. He's been waiting for those people to let down their guard, and also waiting for the steel modules and craftsmen to arrive. Everyone was fooled by him. As Bai Xiling spoke, there was no hint of blame on her face. Instead, there was a deep sense of pride and satisfaction, as if she was the one who had done all of this. This little bastard. This night was destined to be a difficult one for many forces. Early in the morning, the east gradually brightened and the sun rose. As usual, the first warhorse galloped toward Wang Chang's City of Steel, stirring up a cloud of dust. He had been doing this kind of reconnaissance for more than a month and was already extremely familiar with it. The construction of the city is time-consuming and laborious. Without a year or two, it's impossible to complete. I don't know when I'll stop going back and forth like this every day. The rider on horseback muttered to himself. Although reconnaissance was a scout's job and there was nothing to complain about, this was not a battlefield. Every day, they would go to the same place, observe the same things, and give the same answers. This kind of life continued day after day. Even the most experienced scout would find it extremely boring and unbearable. I hope that after a while, I can be transferred to another place. Even the front lines are better than this kind of boring work. I don't want to be stuck here for 2 years. With this thought in mind, the rider urged his horse forward and galloped toward the place he had been observing. The City of Steel was extremely heavily guarded, with several thousand soldiers gathered there. Moreover, these were probably elites who had fought with Uzun and Meng Shizhao in the War of the Southwest. These were true experts. If a conflict occurred, it would be extremely troublesome. Thus, everyone did their best to avoid conflict with them, keeping their distance. In any case, scouts never needed to run right under their noses. Many people had come here to scout, and this place had already become the heart of the empire. The Gogurians, Turks, Western Regioners, Uzan, Arabs, Karak-Spazinu, all of them had come, all of them disguised as normal people. This would have never been possible in the interior of the Tang dynasty, but in Chishi, which was close to the western regions and bordered the territories of Uzan and the Western Turkic Khaganate, it was far too normal. Because there were so many people, one had to choose a place in advance. The knight on horseback chose a low hill for himself. From the height of the warhorse, there was no better place to observe. But when the rider rode toward the hill he frequented as usual, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. As he faced the morning sun, he could faintly make out the shadow of a mountain range. This is... The eyelids of the knight on horseback twitched, and he immediately felt somewhat astonished. After more than a month of scouting, he had become extremely familiar with the geography of Wushang. The area where Wang Chong had established his fief was flat and devoid of any protrusions. The only protrusions were the low hills beneath his feet. Other than that, he couldn't remember any other mountain range. What's going on here? Am I hallucinating? The knight on horseback was astonished, but in the next moment, he finally raised his head. However, it was also at this moment that he finally saw the truth of the mountain, and also saw a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. Facing the rising sun, amidst the light and breeze, a massive, majestic city of steel appeared on the horizon. Unlike what he had seen before, this city of steel was more than 6 meters tall, the height of 3 men. The shiny metal walls were smooth and precipitous. It was a seamless whole, giving off a feeling that it was as unshakable as a mountain. And in the light of the morning sun, the rider could clearly see the billowing smoke and the hundreds of thousands of craftsmen, densely packed together like ants, laboring on the walls, constantly raising, thickening, and reinforcing the walls of the city of steel. This is impossible. The knight on horseback had an excited look on his face. He abruptly widened his eyes as he looked at the scene before him in extreme shock. He had only been gone for a single night, but a massive city more than 6 meters tall had appeared out of nowhere. One night. Just one night. Moreover, a 6-meter-tall city of steel could already be considered a very basic and large-scale fortification. Whether it was warhorses or bows, they could all be used to defend. The only drawback was that if the enemy was prepared and brought siege ladders, they could still climb over the 6-meter-high wall. But 6 meters. This number was like a miracle. In a single night, the entire city of steel had undergone a massive transformation. Now, even if an army were to attack, Wang Cheng's city of steel would still be able to mount a basic defense. And what was even more ridiculous was that this 6-meter-tall steel fortress was still being strengthened. It wouldn't be long before it reached 9 meters. No. I have to quickly report this to Milord. The horseman's heart chilled and his entire body trembled. In the space of a single night, a 6-meter-tall fortress of steel had appeared in Wushang. As a scout, this was a severe dereliction of duty. Hiya! Galloping sounds could be heard as the rider on the horse hurriedly turned the horse around and headed back in the direction they came from. Behind him, the scouts and scouts of the other factions had also arrived. In Nei's voice, the warhorse neighed in fright. This is impossible. How could there be such a thing? No one can do it. One night. Just how did they do it? Something must have gone wrong. I must have overlooked something. Cries of alarm came from behind him. It was clear that he was not the only one who had been alarmed by this city. Bang! A palm slammed down on the metal table, causing the earth to quake and the entire Chishi Protectorate headquarters to sway as if it was on the verge of collapse. What did you say? In a single night, that brat built a city more than 2 zhang tall. Foman Linta's furious voice thundered through the entire protectorate. You actually thought that I would believe it? Are you out of your mind? You dare to spout such nonsense in front of me. Upon receiving the scout's report, Fomenlinta's first reaction was disbelief. No one could build a city at such a speed. This was impossible. Not even a skilled craftsman like Liu Ban would be able to do it. Milord, this subordinate speaks the truth, not the slightest falsehood. That youngest son of the Wang clan truly did manage to uproot a city more than 2 zhang tall in a single night. That city is still standing there. The knight kneeled on the ground in fear and trepidation, but before he could finish speaking, bang! A massive wave of energy swept over him, sending him flying out of the Qixi Protectorate headquarters. Bastard thing! Scout again for me! Fomenlinta's rage seemed to want to tear apart the sky, and all the soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate were trembling before Fomenlinta's rage. In all their years of service with the Protector General, this was the first time they had seen him so angry. Gallop! In a cloud of dust outside the Qixi Protectorate headquarters, the knight who had been sent flying by Fomenlinta mounted his horse and galloped toward Wangchang's city of steel. Longxi, Big Dipper City. It was rather late by the time Geshu Han received the news, but when the messenger pigeon flew into the tower, it still caused quite a stir in Big Dipper City. Milord, this is impossible. How is it possible for someone to create a city overnight? Could it be a false report from the scouts? In Geshu Han's study, a deputy general of the Big Dipper army slammed the letter in his hand onto the table. Absurd. A single night isn't even enough to water the city walls. Did our scout get drunk? He actually sent back this sort of news. Another Big Dipper army general by the side chimed in. Their first reaction upon receiving this news was not shock, but that they had been fooled. Chapter 720. In the army, intelligence was of utmost importance, and the most basic requirement for intelligence was accuracy. As the elite army of the Tang dynasty, the Big Dipper army had used tens of thousands of soldiers to stop Wuzhen's army of several 100,000, preventing them from advancing eastward. As such, the requirements for intelligence were even more stringent. For the scouts at the front lines to send back such ridiculous information, they could already be severely punished according to military law. This was also why the generals were so furious. Milord, who was that scout near Wushang? According to the rules of the army, he can be transferred back, dismissed, and investigated. A furious general of the Big Dipper army said in the study. The ones who need to be dismissed aren't him, but all of you. Suddenly, a gentle, calm, and dignified voice resounded in the study. In an instant, the study fell deathly silent. All the generals had their mouths tightly shut as they stared in the same direction. The second, third, and fourth waves of scouts have already sent back their reports, and they are identical to what all of you have seen. In addition, Lord Fomenlinta of the Qixi Protectorate has also sent me a letter. I'm afraid that everything they said is true. Geshu Han held his hands behind his back, his face impassive. Geshu Han's words caused the entire room to fall silent, a look of disbelief on everyone's faces. But, how could this be? Just how big of a city was that? Is it really possible to build it in a single night? Someone muttered to himself. These words echoed the thoughts in everyone's hearts. Even though no one doubted the great general's words out of respect, Wang Chang's ability to erect a 6-meter-tall steel wall in a single night still seemed like a fantasy to them. But no one knew that although Geshu Han appeared calm on the surface, he was actually just as shocked as the Big Dipper army generals. A single night, more than 2 zhang. Just how did he do it? Geshu Han's mind was in turmoil. Back in the southwest, Geshu Han had already learned that youth in Wushang possessed astonishing charisma and talent. But seeing it once more, Geshu Han still felt a little moved. Geshu Han had originally estimated that Wang Chang's city of steel would take at least 7 or 8 months, but it now appeared that it would take far less than that. Many rules and regulations seemed to immediately become inapplicable when it came to the youngest son of the Wang family. Geshu Han had experienced hundreds of battles in his life and had a tenacious temperament. There were very few things that could move his heart, but right now, Geshu Han truly found it difficult to understand this youth called Wushang. Plans can't keep up with changes. It seems like the plan I prepared for a few months later is useless. I have to find another way. Geshu Han's eyes turned, countless thoughts flitting through his mind. It had been a long time since he had encountered such a powerful opponent. Although he had yet to meet the youngest son of the Wang family, they had already exchanged blows before anyone realized it. There was no doubt that Geshu Han had underestimated his opponent. If he was able to build a 6-meter-tall city wall overnight, then there was no doubt that he had deliberately concealed his abilities from the very beginning, causing them to be careless. Only when everything was ready, when the time was right and everything was ready did he reveal his true prowess. Interesting. A cold light flashed through Geshu Han's eyes. Anyone familiar with the Big Dipper Great General would know that this was a sign that his fighting spirit had truly been roused and that he was taking the challenge seriously. It won't be easy to take root in Wushang. Young Marquis, this is only the beginning. As this thought flitted through Geshu Han's mind, everything quickly calmed down. Anshi, Longshi, Biting, Qishi, everyone was stunned by the city that Wang Chong had built in a single night. Meanwhile, in the distant northwest of the Tang dynasty in Wushang, the scouts of all the factions had personally witnessed an inconceivable sight. On the sparsely populated and barren Silk Road to the west, Wang Chong had for the first time revealed the concepts of modern science and architecture to this world. Under the leadership of Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji, more than 100,000 craftsmen worked at unprecedented speed to construct this never-before-seen city of steel. When the scouts had arrived in the vicinity of Wushang in the morning, they had only seen a 6-meter-tall city of steel, but by nightfall, it had grown to 15 meters tall. Never in the history of the Tang dynasty, or even in the history of the Central Plains, had such a rate of construction occurred, nor had there ever been a precedent for such modular construction. More and more people gathered around the city of steel, and all the factions moved upon hearing the news, sending out several times the number of scouts they had sent before. Each faction wanted to confirm this news again and again. Even many who from the distant western regions had hurried over. Everyone stared in shock as this massive, vast, and majestic city of steel slowly unfurled itself from nothingness into existence. This sight was like a dream, like a miracle. In front of this massive and never-before-seen city of steel, everyone felt a deep sense of insignificance and insignificance, like ants before an elephant. Shock. Inconceivable. Deep reverence. This was what everyone who had seen the construction process of the city of steel felt. Everyone felt a heartfelt reverence toward Wang Chong, the owner of this city of steel and its construction. It was like they were looking up to an unfathomable god. Marquis, building this city of steel is more than enough for this old man to spend the rest of his life. Atop the 15-meter-tall city of steel, fierce winds ruffling his hair and beard, Zhang Shouji stood on the high walls, his face brimming with pride and vigor. He had built countless buildings and cities in his life, and he had even participated in the construction of the imperial palace of the Tang dynasty. But the greatest pride of his life was Lion City by the Arai. That city had changed the fate of the 180,000 Annam Protectorate and saved the southwest. And the other was the city of steel beneath his feet. In the history of the Tang dynasty, as well as everyone's understanding, all cities should have been constructed from earth and stone, but the city beneath his feet had broken all these traditions. This was the first city of steel that had ever been built. The amount of steel and manpower required to build this city was unimaginable to any great clan, faction, or master architect. To put it simply, this city had mobilized the entire world, all the great clans, all the swordsmiths, and all the experienced craftsmen of the provinces and counties. All of them had been used to help him build this city. Other than the imperial palace, nothing like this had ever happened before. This glory was enough to make any civil engineering master feel proud and proud. This was enough to move the heart of any civil engineering master and make them fascinated. Sir Zhang, this is only the beginning. You can't possibly be satisfied already, right? In the future, we will leave even more footprints, not just in the Tang dynasty, but also in other places, and it won't just be this city of steel. Wang Chong and Zhang Shouji stood side by side on the wall and smiled. Ha, that's right. This old man is too easily satisfied. With Marquis here, do you think we won't be able to leave our mark in the annals of history? We'll be able to build an even more majestic and magnificent building for everyone to look up to. Zhang Shouji was taken aback, and then he couldn't help but laugh. He was close to 60 and should have been at the age where he should have retired, but as he and Wang Chong fought together and built cities, even he had slowly forgotten his age. He had become young, hot-blooded, and passionate. Now, even he wanted to know where his limits were. Right, how are the preparations for the beehives in the City of Steel coming along? Wang Chong suddenly asked. In truth, they've already been prepared. According to Marquis's orders, all the beehives have been sealed with wooden strips. Not even the guards escorting them or the craftsmen involved in the construction know about it. Zhang Shouji quickly responded. Wang Chong nodded and looked outside the city, where more and more scouts were gathering 10 some li away. A sharp light flashed through his eyes. The storm is about to rise, and we'll soon need those things. Moreover, with a height of 15 meters, we can begin installing them on the wall. Wang Chong said. Zhang Shouji nodded. In order to construct this city, Wang Chong had invented many ingenious things, such as pulleys, cranes, and a brand new measure of measurement, the meter. Not many people knew of this measure, and it had only been passed down among Zhang Shouji, his disciples, and a few top-class craftsmen. Zhang Shouji had experimented and discovered that this new measure of measurement was much more accurate than the ordinary ruler or zhang, and it was also much more convenient for construction. Thus, he had begun to vigorously promote it to the people around him. By now, this measure of measurement had already been accepted by many master craftsmen, and it was still spreading, becoming more and more widespread. Wang Chong quickly left the City of Steel. By the time the city was 15 meters tall, everything was on the right track. With Zhang Shouji presiding over it, the completion of the City of Steel was only a matter of time. With Bai Xiling, Zhao Yadong, and the other clan experts protecting it, the City of Steel was impregnable and would not encounter any problems in the short term. It's about time to take care of that matter. Standing on the towering steel walls, Wang Chong's eyes flashed as countless thoughts flitted through his mind. Wushang was close to Qixi, and their fates were intertwined. Although Fomin Linta was currently brimming with hostility and making things difficult for him, Qixi did not belong to him. It belonged to the entire empire. But in the future Battle of Talas, the clash between the Tang dynasty and Arabia, the Qixi Protectorate, as the closest source of soldiers, had not sent a single soldier. This was inconceivable. If Gao Xianji had asked for help, the Qixi Protectorate would have sent a large number of soldiers. Perhaps that battle would not have been so utterly defeated, and the Tang dynasty would not have completely lost that battle, never to rise again. But even though he was extremely dissatisfied with Fomin Linta, Wang Chong had to admit that this matter had little to do with Fomin Linta. It wasn't that he didn't want to reinforce Gao Xianji and the Anxi Protectorate army, but that the Qixi Protectorate had no soldiers to send. Chapter 721. The mighty Qixi Protectorate, which guarded the throat of the Tang dynasty, had no soldiers to use. This sounded unimaginable, but it truly was the true situation of the Qixi Protectorate. No one understood this better than Wang Chong. The Qixi Protectorate guarded the throat of the Tang dynasty, situated in the crack between the Uzan Empire and the Western Turkic Khaganate. Every year, regardless of what happened elsewhere, the Qixi Protectorate would be embroiled in all sorts of battles. And the soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate had been whittled down by the repeated assaults of the Uzan Empire and the Western Turkic Khaganate. Although the interior had always been sending soldiers to Qixi, there was a limit to how many soldiers they could send. Before the Battle of Talas, the cavalry of the Uzun Empire and the cavalry of the Western Turkic Khaganate had been abnormally fierce, resulting in a vacuum in the Chishi Protectorate's soldiers. And it was this vacuum that ultimately led to the defeat at the Battle of Talas. Thus, if he wanted to reverse the crushing defeat at the Battle of Talas, he first had to change the fate and situation of the Chishi Protectorate. This was one of the important reasons Wang Chong had given his fief to Wushang. But Wang Chong had never told anyone about this. And if he wanted to change the fate of Chishi, he had to completely drive out the power of the Uzun Empire and the Western Turkic Khaganate. Establishing a city of steel in Wushang and gaining a foothold was only the first step. The second step was to begin repelling the Uzun Empire and the Western Turkic Khaganate to the east. Fomin Linta would never be able to complete this step. In Wang Chang's Grand Marshal of the World's General Stars, Fomin Linta was only a general who could defend, not some general who could advance. One reason was that he had no such intentions, and the other was that he simply didn't have the talent. All he could do was get close. But before embarking on this plan that was destined to shake the entire empire and the western border, Wang Chong had to complete another task. Without that item, no matter how powerful Wang Chong was, he could only be like a housewife without rice. In the end, he could only lament his inadequacy. Without alerting anyone, Wang Chong quietly left the City of Steel in the early morning. If one followed the official road west from Chishi, they would reach the western regions after 700 to 800 li. This place was buffeted by sandstorms and the scenery was rough. Furthermore, there were many who living here, including Sindhi, Abbasid Caliphate, Karak Spazinu, Turks, Uzun, and Han. Furthermore, the number of who far outnumbered the Han. This kind of scene was hard to see anywhere in the Tang dynasty. Young master, this is the place. In a bustling, colorful brothel decorated with carvings and paintings, a middle-aged Han man in his 30s or 40s, wearing a headscarf, respectfully said to a teenager beside him. The youth looked at the brothel and solemnly nodded. Tell Yang Hongchang that I am very satisfied with this matter. Once we succeed, I will not mistreat him. Many thanks, Marquis. The middle-aged man was overjoyed and hurriedly bowed. Did you forget what I told you? Don't call me Marquis here. The youth frowned. Yes, this lowly one was rude. Marquis. Young master, forgive me. A hint of fear flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes as he hurriedly lowered his head. In the entire western regions, there was only one person who could strike such fear into this middle-aged man and also be called Marquis, the young Marquis, Wang Chong. After leaving the City of Steel, Wang Chong disguised himself and circled around the Chishi Protectorate headquarters to reach the Tang dynasty's western regions. This was already the territory of Anshi Protector General Gao Xianji. If these great generals of the empire knew that he was here, they would probably all swarm toward him. But even so, Wang Chong had a reason to come. Let's go. Without another word, Wang Chong stepped over the threshold and into the brothel. This was Wang Chong's first time stepping into a brothel of the western regions. Countless who were jostling against each other, and the sounds of the huqin, the hukanghao, the pipa, the hule, and the hubusi could be heard. The sounds of these instruments were completely different from those of the Central Plains, and they had a different flavor to them. Wang Chong raised his head and glanced over. Amidst the music, he could see the enchanting dancers dancing to the music, making one's blood boil. There's even an Arab dancer. In a place where the were the most concentrated and the laughter was the loudest, Wang Chong could clearly see a beautiful Arab dancer dressed in red, her belly exposed, her hands and feet adorned with bracelets and bells. Her eyes were blue, her lips red, and her eyes as charming as silk. She was biting on a red ribbon hanging from a roof beam as she danced in circles in the air. The jingling of the bells and the music of the instruments drew cheers from the spectators. In the capital, any place with Arab dancers would attract many scholars, nobles, becoming a gathering place for scholars and refined scholars. But the rarer a thing was, the greater its value, and there were not many Arab dancers in the capital. The western regions, however, had the advantage of proximity, and the number of bewitching Arab dancers here was far greater than in the capital. Wang Chang's gaze paused on this Arab dancer for only a few moments before descending the wooden stairs to the second underground floor of the pleasure house. All sorts of Hu languages could be heard here, and shouts, laughter, and curses could be heard. Many who had gathered here, throwing dice, guessing numbers, fighting cocks, dogs, and crickets, creating a foul atmosphere. It was clear that this was a gambling den. Wang Chong had never been one to gamble, but Wang Chong had a reason why he couldn't not come. "Are you sure that he's here?" Wang Chong turned his head and asked. "Marquis can't be wrong. He likes to come here to play the most, and even Patriarch doesn't know why. I only heard that he has some sort of relationship with the mistress of this pleasure house." The middle-aged man sent by Yang Hengchang bowed and said, "In addition, we asked around before coming. Also, we've already asked around before we came. He happens to be in this brothel, on the third floor underground. Only a small number of people can enter, and the threshold is very high. All of them are either rich or noble. Patriarch has spent a great deal of money to prepare an identity for young master. Young master can enter at any time, and no one will stop him. Young master will see him once you enter." Wang Chong nodded at these words. The Yang clan had operated in the western regions for many years and knew this place like the back of its hand. If he wanted to find a single Hu in this crowd, Yang Hengchang was the best choice. Without alerting anyone, Wang Chong quickly descended the stairs to the third underground floor of the pleasure house. Yang Hengchang had taken care of everything along the way. Whenever someone appeared to berate or inspect someone, the Yang clan steward would immediately step forward and negotiate with them, avoiding a lot of trouble. The floor of the third underground floor was covered in red Arabian carpets, and the walls were carved with jade and inlaid with pearls, agates, emeralds, and corals. The decorations were opulent, but they did not lack for elegance. "Marquis, it's inside." The butler of the Yang family led the way. When they reached the innermost and largest room, the butler of the Yang family stopped. Through the door, Wang Chong could hear the coarse laughter of a Turkic-accented man, accompanied by the cheerful laughter of a woman. "Wait for me outside." Wang Chong's eyes flashed as he pushed open the door and strode in with his head held high. In a flash, the laughter in the room came to an abrupt halt. Wang Chong's expression was relaxed as he swept his gaze around the room, quickly settling on a Turkic man with an unbuttoned shirt, a mustache, hawk-like eyes, and a deep nose. "I've finally found him." When he saw the two fist-sized skulls on the Turkic man's shoulders, Wang Chong nodded, a hint of joy in his eyes. These were not real skulls, but skeletons forged from bronze. In Wang Chong's memories, there was only one person who could play with two bronze skulls on his shoulders, the Turkic merchant, Hulayeg. He had another identity. He was the most famous Turkic horse merchant of the western regions, perhaps even the steppe. If Wang Chong wanted to realize his grand plan of repelling the Uzan to the west and the Western Turks to the east, completely changing the situation in Qixi and driving out all the foreign powers, he first needed to have enough warhorses. Wang Chong's first batch of Wushang soldiers were almost done training, but without warhorses, he could not speak of the Wushang cavalry that dominated the world. Thus, even if he had to risk being discovered by Gao Xianji and Foman Linta, Wang Chong had still come to the western regions for the sake of this number one Turkic horse merchant, Hulayeg. Everyone knew that the best warhorses in the world were not the highland steeds of the Uzan, nor were they the warhorses of the Tang dynasty. In truth, the terrain of the Central Plains was not suited to raising warhorses. All the excellent warhorses of the Tang dynasty had come from the Turkic steppe. The warhorses of the Turks just so happened to be the best source of warhorses in the world. The only warhorses that could surpass the Turkic horses were the Arabian warhorses, but Arabia was 10,000 li from the Central Plains. Moreover, the Arabian warhorses were extremely troublesome to raise, and they would not be able to acclimatize to the Central Plains. In comparison, Turkic horses were easier to obtain and easier to produce, making them suitable for raising cavalry. In addition, the best Turkic warhorses were not one bit inferior to the Arabian warhorses. And if Wang Chong wanted to buy the best Turkic warhorses, he couldn't avoid this Hulayeg. Whether he had warhorses from the Eastern Turkic Khaganate to the Western Turkic Khaganate, or even Karak Spazinu, this Hulayeg had a way to obtain them. There was no better horse merchant in the western regions. Wang Chong's Wushang army was about to finish its training, but if he wanted to become that unstoppable and awe-inspiring Wushang cavalry, he still needed a large number of warhorses. However, this was not the main reason why Wang Chong had disguised himself and stealthily arrived here. More importantly, Wang Chong was well aware that the future Tang dynasty was fraught with calamities and was already in troubled times. One war after another was about to break out. In every war, a large number of warhorses would die. In the future, the greatest problem of the Central Plains would not be a lack of soldiers, but a lack of warhorses that would make it impossible to form a cavalry army. And without a cavalry army, there would be no mobility, and they would only be defeated one by one. And the Central Plains could not breed warhorses. One death meant one less, and there was no way to replenish them. Chapter 724. Alas, it still can't hold me. In the darkness, a dazzling light flashed through Wang Chong's eyes like a sharp saber. Clang! With a clear hum, Wang Chong unsheathed the woozy steel sword at his waist and swiftly attacked. Bang! After what seemed like both a second and countless eons, a dazzling beam of light shot out of the darkness. With a single slash, Hulayeg's cage, which had been forged from the finest Arabian steel, was torn to shreds. Wang Chong's body trembled as he broke through the wall of the cage. Without pausing, he stepped on the cage with his right foot, and Wang Chong soared into the air like a hawk. After 10 some zhang, Wang Chong stepped on the wall to his right and once more shot upward. After repeating this process, a few moments later, the pitch-black space above Wang Chong began to glow and rapidly expand. The entrance. Wang Chong raised his head, an idea flashing through his mind. The cage was extremely heavy, so he had fallen extremely quickly. In just a few seconds, he had fallen 70 to 80 meters. To an ordinary person, this sort of situation was certain death, but to an imperial martial expert like Wang Chong, this sort of height wasn't even worth mentioning. Whoosh! At the last moment, Wang Chong's sleeve shook, and like a sharp sword, he flew through the hole and out of the ground, somersaulting as he lightly landed on the ground. Ah! Ah! Wang Chong heard cries of alarm, and when he opened his eyes, he saw that many bodyguards had appeared in the underground chamber, all of them either dead or injured, their bodies drenched in blood. And in the center of these bodyguards was a mysterious man dressed in black and wearing a white mask. He was covered in dust and had a dagger in his hand that was pressed tightly against Hulayeg's neck. Back off quickly! Hulayeg's face was covered in panic, and when he saw Wang Chong, his eyes went wide, the fear in them intensifying. Impossible! How did you get up here? Wang Chong grinned as he slowly walked over under everyone's shocked gazes. Solitary wolf, release him. Wang Chong gestured with his right hand to the mysterious man behind Hulayeg. Yes, Marquis. Lone Wolf's figure moved, leaving behind afterimages as he quickly retreated. You're together. Hulayeg's face was filled with shock. Wang Chong silently smiled. He had sent Solitary Wolf out long ago, and his footprints covered the western regions. Solitary Wolf had lived here for so long that he had taken root, mingling with the locals and even learning quite a bit of the Hu language. The first time Wang Chong had met him, he had almost failed to recognize him. The first thing Wang Chong had done on such an important mission to find Hulayeg was to summon Solitary Wolf back. Hulayeg had believed that tricking him into his residence, trapping him in a cage, and then sinking him into the ground would be enough. One could only say that this was far too childish. Without thorough preparations, how could Wang Chong have so recklessly entered the western regions? Hulaeg, what do you think of our deal? Wang Chong walked over, pulled out the only chair in the room, and sat down. 300,000 warhorses. As long as you can help me get them, our deal is still valid. Hulaeg was stunned, clearly not expecting Wang Chong to not kill him. Are you serious? 300,000 warhorses isn't a small number. At the mention of money, Hulaeg immediately regained his composure, the shrewdness of a merchant appearing in his eyes. Business was business. Since he couldn't beat his opponent or kill him, he could consider doing business with him. This was the instinct of a merchant. Everything had to be done with profit in mind. Since you know that I'm the young marquis of the Tang dynasty, does the mighty Central Plains lack money for a few 100,000 warhorses? Wang Chong smirked. Hulaeg was a meticulous and paranoid person, and persuading him would not be easy. Hulaeg's eyes widened as he fell silent. It was true that Hulaeg rarely interacted with strangers, as it wasn't safe. It was precisely because he had recognized Wang Chong's identity as the young marquis of the Tang dynasty that he had planned to frame him. But it was also for this reason that once he confirmed Wang Chong's identity as the young marquis, Hulaeg felt that he was even more trustworthy than the average person. At the very least, a person of status, as well as a Han marquis, would not easily go back on his word. Moreover, he had the backing of the entire Tang dynasty. In terms of trustworthiness and ability to pay, Wang Chong far surpassed any faction he had ever interacted with. And 300,000 warhorses, this truly was an enormous sum of wealth. At this moment, Hulaeg suddenly felt a little moved. I'll believe you for now, but what's the price? Hulaeg said, a crafty look in his eyes. Business was business, and since the other party had the backing of the entire Tang dynasty, if he didn't ruthlessly extort him, he wouldn't be worthy of being called the Turkic fox of the horse merchants. Wang Chong smiled at these words. At the start, he had been cautious, suspicious, and plotting against him, but now, he was greedy. Hulaeg had undergone a massive transformation. But to Wang Chong, what he feared the most was not Hulaeg's greed, but his lack of greed. As for money, when the great calamity arrived and all the monetary systems collapsed, gold would be useless. If he could buy enough warhorses and change the fate of the Tang dynasty, from a certain perspective, Wang Chong was even willing to give him all the gold of the Tang dynasty. In any case, gold would be no different from stone by then. A high-quality warhorse on the market is 80 taels of gold. I'll give you 100. Wang Chong extended a finger, his expression confident and relaxed. But I only want high-quality warhorses. Good, no problem. At these words, Hulaeg's eyes immediately brightened. Truly high-quality warhorses were bought and sold in large quantities, but they didn't even sell for 80 taels of gold, only 75. Wang Chong's price of 100 taels of gold per horse was a full quarter higher. To a haggling merchant like Hulaeg, this was an irresistible temptation. It had to be said that in the past, when negotiating with Uzun, Mengshi Zhao, Goguryeo, and the other kingdoms of the western regions, even at the price of 75 a horse, they would still haggle with him for a long time. To a horse merchant like Hulaeg, encountering such a straightforward customer was a dream come true. But do you really only want high-quality warhorses? What about the other warhorses? Hulaeg asked, quickly realizing the strangeness of the situation. I don't want anything else. I just want the best warhorses. Wang Chong said. Ordinary warhorses and high-quality warhorses weren't very different, and both seemed like they could fight on the battlefield, but at crucial moments, when they were engaged in a 1,000-li maneuver or charging on the battlefield, the difference between the two would immediately become apparent. Ordinary warhorses could only move in a straight line, but high-quality warhorses could communicate with their riders and become one with them. Moreover, high-quality warhorses had much stronger bones and muscles than ordinary warhorses. Since Wang Chong had recruited Wushang's men, he naturally had to provide them with the best warhorses. After all, In Wang Chang's plan, his Wushang cavalry would be facing Arab cavalry in the future. Only the high-quality warhorses of the Turkic steppe could compete with those tall and sturdy Arab warhorses. No problem. Leave this matter to me. Patting his chest, he agreed very readily this time. As long as it's a warhorse, there's nothing on the steppe that I can't do. But, in terms of money? As Hulaeg spoke, he rubbed the thumb and forefinger of his right hand together, making a gesture that everyone in the world could understand. No problem. For the first transaction, I need 100,000 warhorses. In order to show our sincerity, we'll first conduct a transaction of 10,000 warhorses. In 1 month, I want to see 10,000 high-quality warhorses in my city of steel, and at that time, I will give you the first batch of 10,000 taels of gold. A trifling 10,000 high-quality warhorses shouldn't be much of a problem for the mighty number one horse merchant of the Turks, right? Wang Chong said as he glanced at Hulaeg. Ha, what are you saying? It's just 10,000 high-quality warhorses. In 20 days, I can help you get to Wushang. Hulaeg patted his chest and heroically declared. If Wang Chong wanted 100,000 high-quality warhorses in 1 month, Hulaeg truly wouldn't have been able to do it. After all, this sort of thing required time and needed to be collected from the various tribes. But 10,000 high-quality warhorses, coupled with Hulaeg's connections with the chiefs of the various Turkic tribes, wasn't much of a problem. Moreover, 10,000 excellent warhorses were equivalent to 1,000,000 taels of gold. It was enough for him to bribe his subordinates and prepare for this unprecedented transaction. The two sides quickly came to an agreement, and in accordance with the customs of the Hu merchants of the western regions, they signed a contract. Both sides bit their thumbs and used their blood to leave fingerprints. That's right, Hulaeg, I heard that you have a steward called Yulug. Wang Chong suddenly raised his head, a smirk on his face. What's wrong? Hulaeg said, his heart thumping in his chest. Hulaeg truly had found several stewards to manage his finances, but very few outsiders knew of this matter other than the people at his side. Moreover, Hulaeg would never bring them along when he went out to discuss business, and these stewards would never show themselves in public. Hulaeg was very apprehensive about this, so he had intentionally concealed it. Not even his old friends of several decades had ever seen them, much less outsiders. Hulaeg simply couldn't understand. This was clearly Wang Chang's first time in the western regions, his first time meeting him, so how did he know that he had stewards at his side, even that he knew the name Yulug? Ha, it's nothing. I was just asking. But it's impossible to know a man's heart, so Sir Hulaeg should keep an eye out. Wang Chong smiled and turned to leave. Hulaeg was confused at the start, but when he saw the 3 fingers sticking up behind Wang Chong, he instantly paled and understood. Chapter 725. Young Master, is that Hulaeg really trustworthy? Solitary Wolf suddenly asked as the Hu jostled against each other on the road. After wandering the world for more than a year, even though Wang Chong had already been made a marquis, Solitary Wolf still used the term young master. It has nothing to do with trust. It's fine as long as there's profit. Moreover, he has no choice but to believe in this matter. Wang Chong smiled, but he was thinking back to the strange expression on Hulaeg's face as he left. Yulug was Hulaeg's closest and most trusted steward, managing more than 70% of his wealth. In Hulaeg's heart, he was absolutely loyal and devoted. Alas, not even Hulaeg had expected that in 3 or 4 days, this loyal and devoted subordinate would escape with his concubine and all the wealth. Hulaeg's subsequent series of grave mistakes and his execution by the Western Turkic Khagan Ishbara probably had something to do with this. In addition, young master, 100,000 warhorses is no small sum. Can we really afford it with our abilities? Solitary Wolf worriedly said. Based on the price Wang Chong had given, 100 taels of gold for 1 horse, 100,000 warhorses would be 10 million taels of gold. Wang Chong had even borrowed money from the more than 1,000 great clans of the capital to construct the city of steel. The Wang clan's ability to purchase 100,000 warhorses was simply not enough. Ha ha ha, I saw that you were frowning after leaving Huleeg's residence. You didn't say much, and you had a worried look on your face. So this is what you were worried about. Our Wang clan naturally doesn't have the ability to purchase 100,000 warhorses, and besides, what does our Wang clan need so many warhorses for? Wang Chong chuckled, a look of complete nonchalance on his face. He had never considered how much gold was needed to buy horses, nor did he care. Then why does young master want to buy so many warhorses? Lone Wolf tilted his head and asked in confusion. He had always thought that Wang Chong had disguised himself and sneaked into the western region to buy so many warhorses for him, but now it seemed that this was not the case at all. He couldn't help but feel puzzled. Even after following Wang Chong for so long, he still felt like he couldn't keep up with Wang Chong's train of thought. Ha, of course it is for the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong said without hesitation. Of the 100,000 warhorses, he would keep 10,000 at most. He would take 30 to 40,000 more and give the rest to the imperial court. Raising these warhorses required a considerable amount of money, and only the imperial court could afford it. Other than that, as for the money needed to buy a horse, whether it was 10 million taels of silver or tens of millions of taels of silver, it was just a drizzle for the current Tang dynasty. What did it count for? Although the Tang dynasty had declined militarily, the people yearned for peace and no longer had the bravery and aggressiveness of the past. But after so many years of peace and prosperity, and trading with other countries, they had indeed accumulated a great deal of wealth. If he didn't use it now, when would he keep it? Wang Chong quickly left the western regions. Just as he had arrived, he didn't alarm anyone. The moment he left, flap flap. A messenger pigeon with golden claws soared into the sky, traveling several times faster than ordinary messenger pigeons as it left the western regions and flew toward the capital of the Great Tang. Several days later, the carrier pigeon descended from the sky. It passed through many windows and landed in King of Song's study. This is a letter from Wang Chong. The King of Song took out the letter and immediately began to read it. The more he read, the brighter the eyes of the King of Song became. In the end, he couldn't help but laugh in excitement. Ha ha ha, 100,000 high-quality warhorses. Wang Chong, you have rendered a great service to the imperial court. No matter how many tens of thousands of taels of gold you need, this king will submit a memorial to the imperial court and do everything in his power to resolve the problem for you. I'd like to see just who would dare to act selfishly and go against the flow on such an important matter that benefits the country and the people. With these last words, the King of Song's face suddenly turned frigid. Matters had their own priorities. He could ignore ordinary matters, but when it came to the warhorses that the imperial court urgently needed, if anyone dared to cause trouble on such an important matter, he might have to kill a few imperial censors and officials. Without the slightest delay, the King of Song took Wang Chong's letter and quickly left the King of Song residence. Wang Chong quickly returned to the City of Steel. He had spent 10-some days here, and the current City of Steel was very different from before. The 40-meter-tall city wall stood tall on the ground. It was smooth and precipitous, enough to make any kind of scaling ladders or other siege weapons sigh. After the outer wall was finished, nearly 150,000 craftsmen were already working on the inner wall, as well as the various restaurants, tea houses, and inns in the City of Steel. The various aristocratic families also began to send people to build their own restaurants and shops. The entire city was under construction, and there were signs of activity in full swing. At this point, Wang Chong's fief was on the right track. Nothing could stop it. Marquis, we've used up all the steel and city wall modules in the early stage. I'm afraid that the speed of construction won't be as fast. We still need the sword shops and sword towers to build the subsequent city wall modules and send them to Wushang. I'm afraid it won't be delivered in a short time. Standing on the tall city wall, Zhang Shouji faced the fierce winds and said, "Let's go." In addition, besides simple defense, the city also needs to have a few layers of walls, as well as a few arrow buttresses and other places for soldiers to hide from enemy attacks. I'm afraid that it won't be as fast as it was at the beginning. It doesn't matter. At this stage of the City of Steel, we already have a foothold. This was my goal from the very beginning. We've already achieved it. Wang Chang's long hair and robes fluttered in the wind. There was urgency and slowness, and the modular construction of the city seemed incredibly fast. To many people, Wang Chang's City of Steel was a miracle. But many people had overlooked how much manpower, resources, and time had been spent to prepare the modules of the City of Steel. If not for the resources and wealth of the great clans of the capital, as well as the forging ability of the entire Central Plains, the astonishing feat of building a city in a single night would have been impossible. This was an enormous and unimaginable undertaking, and for many factions and many people, it was nothing more than an extravagant hope. But even though it had all sorts of shocking aspects, behind the astonishing speed of the modular construction, there was still a massive flaw. All of its shocking aspects were based on the ample preparations made in the beginning. Once the modules were used up, they would have to wait for the later stages of construction, which would greatly slow it down. This was also the current situation of the City of Steel. This period of frenzied construction had already used up all of the surrounding city wall modules, so the speed of construction would naturally slow down. But for Wang Chong, he had already achieved his goal. Rumble. As he was speaking with Zhang Shouji, the earth suddenly quaked, and a roar like that of a tidal wave came from the north. In shock, Wang Chong turned his head and saw that on the horizon, thick plumes of smoke were rising into the sky. Countless black dots were galloping through the smoke, exuding an intimidating aura. Enemy attack. A howl tore through the sky. Around the City of Steel, the several thousand elite cavalry that Wang Chong had brought from the southwest, as well as the city guards that the great clans had brought, immediately responded. In a flash, all the nearby guards had gathered, and in a few short moments, they had taken up battle formations, ready to charge at any moment and attack the enemy. Buzz! Not far away, the sound of metal clanging could be heard as two huge steel gates opened. Not only could they welcome their own knights into the city, but they could also keep the enemies outside the city at all times, relying on the thick and sturdy defense of the city. Creak creak. At Wang Chang's ears, the master archers that the great clans had brought charged onto the walls, knocked their arrows, and aimed to the north. In just a few seconds, the City of Steel, which had been bustling with activity and lax just a moment ago, was now fully armed and on guard, as if it was made of steel. Buzz! The enemy was getting closer and closer, and the dust was getting thicker and thicker. Just when it seemed like an intense battle was about to begin, Wang Chang's eyes widened and he sneered. Stop! Pass on my order. All soldiers are to stand by and maintain a defensive posture. Archers, put away their bowstrings. Without my order, no one is to act rashly. Wang Chong raised an arm and ordered. This abrupt order left everyone dumbfounded. Old Mr. Zhang, please wait here. I'll leave for a while. I'll handle this matter. Standing on the walls, Wang Chong looked into the distance at the dust and sneered. It seems like a good friend has come. After saying this, Wang Chong turned around and quickly left the walls along the stairs. Behind him, Zhang Shouji was still dumbfounded, not understanding what was going on. But as he faced the blazing sun, he narrowed his eyes. A moment later, Zhang Shouji's expression shook as he suddenly understood something. So it's him. Zhang Shouji blurted out in shock. As he looked at the fluttering war banner that had suddenly emerged from the dust, a hint of deep concern appeared in his eyes. By Siling, Zhao Yadong, stand guard in the city. Don't come over. Cheng Sanyuan, Su Shixian, follow me. Yes, Marquis. Warhorses galloped out of the city, leaving a trail of dust in their wake. Cheng Sanyuan and Su Shixian were both elites who had followed Wang Chong through life and death in the southwest. They were among the several thousand experts Wang Chong had recruited from the great clans. These two were very powerful, far surpassing the experts of the other clans, and they were extremely loyal. The clans they had served, in order to curry favor with Wang Chong and at the same time improve their relationship with the Wang clan so that they could climb onto the massive war chariot that was the king of Song, and the Wang clan had simply gifted these two to Wang Chong as his personal attendants. But what Wang Chong valued was not just their martial arts, but also their courage, their ability to adapt to the situation, and their decision-making abilities. In the War of the Southwest, when Li Sai was leading them back, the Uzun had attempted a counterattack, hoping to break Li Sai's charging formation by attacking from the side. But these two had sensed the danger ahead of time and led a small group to break away from the Uzun cavalry before they could form a formation and take the initiative to charge. Chapter 726. Fomin Linta's warning. 2. Li Sai had personally spoken of this matter, and he had praised them greatly. Wang Chong had also felt that they were not bad after observing them, so he had given them the task of guarding the city of steel. Up until now, the two of them had done an outstanding job in handling the danger. Rumble. The cloud of dust from the north was getting closer and closer. Everyone in the city of steel could feel the trembling, and all the craftsmen had long ago taken refuge within the walls. The busy construction also came to a halt. The vicinity of the city of steel was suddenly silent, leaving only the neighing of the warhorses from the north. The atmosphere was extremely tense at this moment. More than 100,000 pairs of eyes nervously stared at the silent and oppressive silhouettes in the roiling dust. Only Wang Chong sat on his horse, his expression relaxed, neither servile nor overbearing as he silently waited. Buzz! As they got closer, the warhorses slowed, and a massive war banner, more than 1 zhang tall, was raised in the roiling dust. On this black dragon-patterned war banner was a golden rock eagle, one of the most commonly seen creatures in the western regions. Its eyes were sharp, its claws like hooks, and its feathers like iron. It seemed like it was about to break out of the banner. This was the first time Wang Chong had seen such a war banner since arriving in the western regions. As Wang Chong was examining this war banner, an extremely muscular and tall figure on a warhorse galloped out of the dust like a demon god. At this moment, everyone could clearly see that this person had a thick beard, a greenish-black complexion, and a pair of eyes like copper bells. As they looked around, they exuded a cold and intimidating light. The moment this person appeared, a tidal wave of pressure pressed down. Other than Wang Chong, everyone in the city of steel, including the resolute Cheng Sanyuan and Su Shixian who had experienced the trials of the Southwest, lowered their heads, none of them daring to meet his eyes. Wang Chong. Just as everyone lowered their heads, a wild voice that sounded like the grinding of a sword rang out in everyone's ears. The voice was sharp, and it carried a sense of superiority and oppression. Upon hearing this hostile voice, Wang Chong immediately chuckled. Lord Protector General. After calling out these 4 words, Wang Chong immediately urged his horse forward and welcomed him without the slightest bit of fear. In the entire Tang dynasty, in the entire western regions, there was only one person who could speak with such a unique voice, like the hum of a saber or sword, Qixi Protector General Fomin Linta. I still can't hold myself back. Wang Chong sneered in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. Wushang was so close to the Qixi Protectorate that nothing he did could escape Fomin Linta's notice. But it was clear that when the city of steel suddenly rose to a height of 15 meters and continued to rise, Fomin Linta realized that he had miscalculated and could no longer sit still. The cries of warhorses resounded through the area. As countless nervous gazes watched, Wang Chong urged his horse forward, leaving a trail of dust in his wake as he drew closer and closer to Fomin Linta. In the distance, the world-renowned Protector General began to slow down, and the churning dust gradually settled, revealing rows of black-armored elite soldiers who were clearly veterans of the battlefield. In the harsh sunlight, all these black-armored soldiers marched in unison, as if they were one person. They did not make the slightest mistake in their advance. Even someone of Wang Chang's insight found it very difficult to find fault with them. Not bad. As immovable as a mountain, as aggressive as fire. In his early years, Fomin Linta guarded Anxi, so he definitely has a knack for leading soldiers. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Even though he and Fomin Linta were at odds, Wang Chong had to admit that this great general of the empire in Qixi truly did have some outstanding qualities. Qixi's geography was unique. To the west was the ambitious Uzun Plateau, and to the west was the Turkic cavalry led by Ishbara Khagan of the Western Turks. For Fomin Linta to be able to survive in this crevice and keep the other two factions at bay, there was no need to doubt Fomin Linta's strength. These immovable and aggressive Qixi cavalry before him were proof that Fomin Linta had displayed the extraordinary abilities of an imperial great general. Alas, his jealousy is too strong. His desire for power is too strong. As this thought flitted through his mind, Wang Chong quickly regained his composure. Fomin Linta truly was very valiant. If one were to put aside certain things, Wang Chong would even be happy that the Tang dynasty had such a great general. Alas, Fomin Linta was too selfish. He was a Hu, so he had recklessly promoted Hu in the army. Almost all the important positions in the army were occupied by Hu. Whether or not the Han had talent, they were always suppressed. Moreover, Fomin Linta seemed to be establishing a small Hu court in Qixi. Otherwise, a memorial to Wang Chong regarding the regional commander's incident would not have infuriated him so much. Moreover, while Qixi was more than capable of defending, it lacked the ability to advance. In all his years, Fomin Linta had never taken the initiative to attack. Qixi's situation had never changed in all the years he had presided over it. It could only passively wait for Uzun and the Western Turks to attack. Whether it was to change the outcome of the upcoming Battle of Talas, to gather more soldiers for Anxi, or to change the situation in Qixi, Wang Chong had to think of a way to remove Fomin Linta or transfer him elsewhere. As long as Fomin Linta was present, he would be unable to move freely in the western regions. This was a fact that had to be changed. The rumbling slowly died down as the two sides got closer and closer, and the atmosphere grew tenser and tenser. Finally, Wang Chong and Fomin Linta, one young and one old, were only 8 to 9 zhang away from each other, and the atmosphere was extremely tense. The two looked at each other in silence. Impudent! In front of Lord Protector General, why haven't you dismounted and bowed? Suddenly, a loud roar came from the side. It was one of Fomin Linta's deputies, armed to the teeth and armed with a black bandolier, pointing a finger at Wang Chong as he spoke in a harsh voice. He's trying to intimidate me. Wang Chong inwardly chuckled, his eyes fixed on Fomin Linta. In the past, with the difference in ranks and Wang Chong not holding any official post, Fomin Linta truly would have been able to easily suppress him. But that was then, and this was now. Even in the face of this Hu Protector General, the great general of Qixi whose words carried enormous weight, Wang Chong felt no fear. Moreover, he was the true Grand Marshal of the Central Plains. Impudent! Our milord is the young Marquis of the Imperial Court, a title personally bestowed upon him by the Son of Heaven. He is a true Duke of the Tang dynasty, his status no lower than Lord Protector General's. Moreover, the Holy Emperor personally bestowed a courtesy name upon him, making him the Son of Heaven's disciple. He represents His Majesty the Holy Emperor. Do you dare to have Marquis bow? As expected, a rebuke came from behind him, and before Wang Chong could say anything, Qing Sanyuan had urged his horse forward and rebuked Fomin Linta's deputy. Although they couldn't resist Fomin Linta's great general pressure and gaze, they were still capable of dealing with his deputy. Wang Chong remained motionless on his horse, nodding his head in approval. Qing Sanyuan and Su Shixian truly had reacted very quickly. In this sort of situation, they were much better suited than him. This was also why Wang Chong valued them. Lord Protector General, I pay my respects. I did not know of Lord Protector General's arrival and failed to welcome you. For what noble purpose has Milord honored us with his presence? Wang Chong clasped his hands and spoke from atop his horse. His words immediately drew everyone's attention. The city of steel was quiet. The moment the commanders of both sides spoke, even Qing Sanyuan and that foeman Linta shut their mouths. Everyone knew that the protagonists of today's meeting were these two. Every word that came out of their lips was highly likely to affect the future of the city of steel and all of Qixi. No one dared to interrupt at a time like this. Foeman Linta said nothing, but his hawk-like eyes slowly turned as he examined Wang Chong like a hawk staring at its prey. Even though the two sides had been mortal enemies during the regional commanders' incident, Foeman Linta had even been the first to submit a memorial requesting that the Holy Emperor execute Wang Chong. But in reality, this was the first time Foeman Linta had seen this culprit. Even though he was brimming with enmity toward this Wang clan youth, Foeman Linta had to admit that this boy was completely different from what he had imagined. Young. Truly too young. He looked no more than 16 or 17. At this age, even someone as proud as Foeman Linta was still struggling in the western regions. But Wang Chong had already become the young marquis of the Tang dynasty, had been bestowed a courtesy name by the Son of Heaven, and had a high official rank. If Wang Chong had only relied on his illustrious family background and his reputation as the former prime minister of the Tang dynasty, he would have been able to do well. But it just so happened that not too long ago, he had personally led a team to defeat names like Hushu Wuzong, Daluan Ruozan, and Duan Gechuan. Even now, Foeman Linta doubted just how much of this was true. But the coalition army of Uzan and Mengshi Zhao had only suffered a crushing defeat after Wang Chong had joined. Moreover, they had lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers, including a large number of cavalry. Their losses were far greater than those of the Tang dynasty, and this was an indisputable fact. To have this sort of ability at the age of 16 or 17 was something that Foeman Linta believed was absolutely impossible. Even if he had started practicing the art of war in his mother's womb, it would still be impossible. The art of war was not something that could be learned from just reading a few books on the art of war. It was something that could only be obtained through the hardships of war and experience countless battles. All formidable generals were like this. But this was not the only thing that left Foeman Linta confused and uncertain. Having spent half of his life on the battlefield, Foeman Linta had killed countless opponents on the battlefield. For this reason, his body exuded such a thick and baleful aura that not even his personal guards dared to approach him, much less meet his eyes. In the western regions, there was once a rumor. A notorious criminal of the western regions had fled for several decades, but no one had ever been able to catch him. In the end, while in Qixi, he had accidentally bumped into Foeman Linta's carriage, and with just a glance, he had been so frightened that he had lost control of his bowels and bladder and died. This was the baleful aura on Foeman Linta's body. Chapter 727. One could easily imagine just how thick the fiendish aura on Foeman Linta's body was. This sort of battlefield tempering, an aura honed through killing and stepping on countless bones, was not something a normal person could resist. But Wang Chong was only 17 years old, yet he dared to look him in the eye without the slightest fear. Foeman Linta had never encountered such a situation before. No matter what, this was not something a 17-year-old youth should have. If this boy isn't eliminated, he'll definitely become a major threat in the future. A cold light flashed in Foeman Linta's eyes, his killing intent blazing. Not only had Wang Chong's performance failed to arouse any appreciation in him, it only made his killing intent even more intense. The more outstanding and formidable this youngest son of the Wang clan was, the more apprehensive he became, and the more he wanted to eliminate him. He was only 17 years old, but he was already able to cause such a huge wave. With a single memorial, he had forced millions of Hu soldiers into an extremely passive position. If he was allowed to mature, wouldn't they, the Hu generals, be pushed into a corner by him and forced out of the upper echelons of the army? Kid, have you heard of the saying, the heart is easy to break? Foeman Linta suddenly said. Your edge is too sharp. Buzz. The moment Foeman Linta spoke, the mood suddenly changed, becoming 100 times more solemn than before. On the walls of the city of steel, the more than 100,000 craftsmen and guards paled at these words. Fomin Linta has gone too far. He's clearly trying to bully Wang Chong. On the high walls, Bai Xiling bellowed furiously. However, barely after she said those words, a slender hand suddenly grabbed her arm. Xiling, say no more. A voice came from the side. Bai Xiling turned her head in surprise and saw that Zhao Yadong was looking forward, her expression unprecedentedly grave. Bai Xiling was startled. At first, her face was full of doubt, but soon, she felt something, and her expression became serious. She tightly pursed her lips and didn't say a word. The vicinity of the city of steel was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Other than Wang Chong and Fomin Linta, everyone else was quiet out of fear, not even daring to breathe loudly, much less interrupt. One was the new young marquis of the Tang dynasty, the son of Heaven's disciple. The other was an imperial great general of the western border of the Tang dynasty, wielding immense authority and seniority. The status of these two people was enough for everyone present to look up to them and feel awe. What does Lord Protector General mean by this? Wang Chong closed his eyes slightly, and his expression became much colder. Since Fomin Linta had come so aggressively, there was no need for him to be too polite. You're a smart man. You didn't think that I'd forgotten about the regional commander's incident so quickly, did you? If I were you, I would immediately withdraw from Wushang and end this city of steel. Fomin Linta's eyes were cold, his expression unquestionable. No matter how sharp Wang Chong was, no matter how popular he was in the capital, in front of Wang Chong, he would always be a young brat. In terms of seniority, Wang Chong was 10,000 li away from him, and this was even more so in terms of age. Thus, Fomin Linta had never even thought about being polite, nor did he intend to be. This is impossible. Before Fomin Linta could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Wang Chong's voice, which was even more resolute than his own. In an instant, the mood plummeted. Even the knights the pair had brought felt their scalps go numb and their bodies tremble with tension. No one had expected that these two supreme personages of the empire would already be at loggerheads the moment they met. The anger of an individual of this level was enough to make anyone pale in fear. Lord Protector General, do you know what you're saying? Wushang is my territory. I don't think I need Milord's permission to build a city on my territory, much less Milord's concern. Wang Chong coldly said. The two of them had a grudge over the regional commander's incident, and Wang Chong had long ago expected that Fomin Linta would not allow him to peacefully build a city in Wushang, but he had not expected it to come so early and so fiercely. Brat, you're too arrogant. In a gust of sand, Fumeng Lingcha suddenly urged his horse forward. At the same time, his body began to exude a domineering aura. At this moment, Fomin Linta's figure suddenly became as vast as a mountain, and even the air in a radius of several dozen zhang began to blur. This pressure was simply suffocating. Nay! His warhorses whinnied. Under the pressure of Fomin Linta's great general level, Qing Sanyuan, Su Shixian, and the others around Wang Chong were the first to give in, their horses constantly retreating. Milord! The pair paled in fright. The warhorses of the army had all been trained for a long time, and they would never retreat even in the face of a mountain of blades or a sea of blood. But the pressure and baleful aura exuding from Fomin Linta's body was so intense that not even his warhorses could stand it. Nay! On the other side, the Qixi elites behind Fomin Linta also neighed. However, they were still Qixi elites who had followed Fomin Linta for a very long time, so they had retreated ahead of time. The only two commanders left in the center were Wang Chong and Fomin Linta. When two enemies met on a narrow path, only the courageous would emerge victorious. Fomin Linta released his energy, and the pressure of an imperial great general was not something that ordinary warhorses and soldiers could endure. This was a clear indication of the difference between the two. Although Wang Chong had already reached the imperial martial realm, he was still far from a great general like Fomin Linta. The difference in their cultivation levels was obvious at a glance. Bastard! Wang Chang's knuckles cracked as he clenched his fists. How could he not know what Fomin Linta was planning? If he were still the Grand Marshal of the world, Fomin Linta's move would have been useless against him. But that was then, and this was now. He was still far from being able to compare to a top-class great general of the empire. But even so, Wang Chong did not panic. He extended the index and middle fingers of his right hand into the thick mane of his warhorse and pressed down on a hidden acupuncture point. The warhorse that had been neighing uneasily suddenly closed its eyes and calmed down. Let alone the soldiers of the Qixi Protectorate, even Fumeng Lingcha was flabbergasted. He had never expected such a development. But not even Fomin Linta knew that although Wang Chong was weaker than him, he knew many methods to calm a warhorse. Horses had a sleeping point that could be used to calm them down with the appropriate amount of strength. This was only one of the simplest methods. Brat, you've got some tricks up your sleeve. Fomin Linta angrily laughed. The more Wang Chong acted this way, the more he wanted to kill him. Not even your father and brother would dare to act so impudently in front of me. I'll give you one more chance. You have 10 days to think it over. If this city is still here by then, don't blame me for being impolite. Remember, this isn't your capital. With these words, Fomin Linta suddenly turned his horse around and left. Withdraw. With this one word, Fomin Linta galloped off into the distance. Behind him, the elites of the Qixi Protectorate stirred up a cloud of dust as they left under the respectful gazes of the crowd. Bastard! Not long after Fomin Linta left, the neighing of warhorses came from behind him. Bai Siling, dressed in snow-white clothes, was galloping over with Xiao Yadong. This is your fief, bestowed upon you by the Holy Emperor. What right does he have to do this? Bai Siling was so angry that her face was red. Fomin Linta truly has gone too far. He's coming for Wang Chong. But this truly is his territory, so it'll be very difficult for us to defeat him. Xiao Yadong said. She was clearly much calmer and more rational than Bai Siling, but her brow was also creased with deep concern. After all, Fomin Linta was the empire's protector general and one of its finest great generals. Whether it was in prestige, strength, or status, he was not someone that Wang Chong could compare to. Moreover, this place was far from the capital, and the Wang clan's prestige and influence were at their lowest. On the other hand, Fomin Linta wielded real authority. If Wang Chong offended him, he would find it difficult to take a single step forward. He dares. Bai Siling was enraged, her face brimming with righteous indignation. Can a protector general act without regard for the law? I don't believe that he would dare to act recklessly. There are so many imperial censors in the imperial court, and just a spit from each of them would be enough to drown him. And even if he really did dare to do something, would the Holy Emperor spare him? He truly wouldn't dare to come in the open, but it's hard to say behind his back. A voice suddenly sounded in her ears, and Bai Siling's eyebrows shot up. Just as she was about to fly into a rage, she caught sight of a familiar face. Wang Chong. Bai Siling stared in a daze at Wang Chong. If Fomin Linta really wanted to act, he would have already done so. This is a warning, and also a threat. As one of the supreme great generals of the empire, he truly does have far too many methods at his disposal. It seems like the existence of the City of Steel is truly a threat to his position, making him feel uneasy. Wang Chong said. But are we just going to let this go? Bai Siling angrily said. Wang Chong said nothing. Everything was still not ready, and this truly was not the time to fall out with Fomin Linta. Marquis, should we report this matter to the imperial court? Perhaps this will make him restrain himself a little. A voice whispered. Wang Chong turned his head and saw that it was Qing Sanyuan and Su Shixian, their eyes also tinged with anger. It's useless. Without concrete evidence, the imperial court will never accept our one-sided words. Moreover, Fomin Linta only made a verbal threat, not actually doing anything. Even the imperial censors will find it very difficult to accuse him of anything. This was not the first time Wang Chong had encountered the politics of the imperial court. Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen had been constantly advising him, intentionally cultivating his sensitivity to the politics of the imperial court. Thus, Wang Chong was well aware that Fomin Linta's actions today would find it very difficult to convict him. Chapter 728. There's no need to worry about him. Go back. This is my territory. No matter what Fomin Linta wants to do, as long as he's in my territory, he won't be able to do anything, because this is my territory. Wang Chong's last words were resolute and filled with heroism. As a fief bestowed upon him by the Holy Emperor, Wang Chong had complete jurisdiction over this territory. Even the nobles and nobles of the imperial clan would have to submit to his control. This was Wang Chong's special privilege. It seems like I have to hurry. No matter what, I can't let Fomin Linta stay here any longer. Wang Chong quietly said to himself as he watched Fomin Linta leave. Fomin Linta's appearance had made him even more determined to replace Fomin Linta as Qixi Protector General. Otherwise, who knew how many more quarrels would arise in the future? With a wave of his hand, Wang Chong quickly left with his entourage. The construction of the City of Steel returned to normal, and rumbling booms resounded through the world. "Milord, do we really have to wait 10 days? That bastard's construction speed is too fast. In 10 days, the city will probably be finished. Won't it be too late by then? And that brat is too arrogant. Just by relying on the prestige and status of the Wang clan, he doesn't even have Lord Protector General in his eyes." As Wang Chong was returning to the city, a deputy of the Qixi Protectorate finally couldn't help but comment. "That's right." The other deputy agreed, a look of indignation on his face. "He's just a brat who's still wet behind his ears. He's only been made a marquis, but he dares to speak to Lord Protector General like this. You have to know that when Lord Protector General was fighting for the Tang dynasty, this brat was probably still in his mother's womb. The people of the Wang clan are too arrogant." The two of them complimented each other, causing Fomin Linta's expression to turn incomparably ugly. It was clear that things were different from what Fomin Linta had expected. Wang Chong's attitude was much tougher than he had imagined. Enough. When Fomin Linta opened his mouth, the two of them were shocked. "Do you really think I'll give him 10 days? Since he doesn't know what's good for him, then don't blame me." "Alona, has everything been arranged?" "Sir, everything has been arranged. We are just waiting for your orders." A black-armored general of the Qixi Protectorate lowered his head and spoke, his expression extremely respectful. "Then let's begin." Fomin Linta gritted his teeth as a cold light flashed across his eyes. Rumble. At this moment, a heaven-shaking rumble came from the City of Steel. Hearing this sound, the Qixi Protectorate fell silent. Fomin Linta's complexion turned even more unsightly. "Let's go." With this order, Fomin Linta and his Qixi elites quickly vanished into the distance. All of Qixi had regained its calm, but beneath this calm surface, an invisible storm was brewing. Several hundred li to the west of Qixi, a plateau rose up from the ground like a lofty mountain overlooking an abyss. Although this land was empty and ownerless, many people could only look up at it from a distance. This was the territory of the Uzan. The thin air of the plateau made the majority of the world's elite cavalry feel a sense of dread. Not even the extremely aggressive Turks had ever thought of occupying this plateau. Thus, the Uzan often said that this was their land bestowed by the heavens. In the golden autumn of the 9th month, the vegetation was lush, and the plateau was thriving. Rumble. After some time, the earth suddenly began to tremble. At first, it was as light as a breeze, but as it went on, it grew more and more intense, and even the grass on the plateau began to sway. Huh! A powerful gust of wind blew out of the plateau, and at this moment, a cloud of dust appeared in the distance. Sharp whistles could be heard coming from within the dust. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of Tibetan cavalry had arrived like dark clouds in flowing water, one wave after another. It was a shocking sight to behold. The Uzan plateau was flat, and to the Uzan who disliked restrictions, galloping on their horses was their favorite form of freedom. Nay! Boom! As the countless Uzan cavalry were howling and galloping, a dragon's roar shook the world, drowning out the neighing of the thousands of warhorses. The originally bold and unrestrained horses immediately became much quieter. Rumble! In the blink of an eye, a divine steed, snow-white as a dragon, charged out of the dust like a bolt of lightning. On the back of the horse was a stalwart man, more than 7 feet tall, with a mustache and long and narrow eyes. His gaze exuded a sharp light, and his demeanor was like that of a god, giving off an intimidating aura. In the blink of an eye, Nay's divine steed with snow-white fur and jade-like hooves stopped at the edge of the plateau. Behind him, the tens of thousands of Tibetan highland steeds also began to slow down, their horses and riders submissive and respectful expressions on their faces. The majority of the highland steeds of the Uzan were either black, or variegated in color. Very few were as white as snow, and even their hooves had a jade-like luster. There was only one person on the northeastern border who could ride a divine steed of the Great Snow Mountain. Eagle of the Steppe, Dusong Mengpoj. The battle between Longxi and the Big Dipper army had just concluded, so no one had expected this great general of the Uzan Empire to stealthily appear here. Look, the mountains and rivers stretching for 10,000 li. How beautiful! Dusong Mengpoj suddenly said from atop his horse. His eyes shone as he looked down from the towering Uzan plateau, the mountains and rivers of the desert rising and falling, and even the distant Turkic steppe. Just where in the world could there be more blessed by the heavens than the Uzan plateau, a spirit and an advantage that allowed it to sweep through the world? Will Lord Mengpoj also be enchanted by the mountains and rivers? Why is it that I'm only interested in killing? Suddenly, a voice came from behind Dusong Mengpoj, accompanied by the clopping of hooves. A tall and slender figure with a sharp edge slowly appeared behind Dusong Mengpoj. This person had a long and slender face that seemed to have been chiseled out by a blade or axe, giving off an extremely sharp and menacing aura. Compared to Dusong Mengpoj's gentle and unfathomable aura, this person's aura was much more frigid. Beneath him was also a divine steed that was as white as snow. But unlike Dusong Mengpoj's horse, the hooves of this horse were crimson, so deep that they seemed to be dripping blood. Everyone who saw the hooves of this warhorse would feel a deep sense of discomfort. In truth, the slender figure on the back of the horse was no different. His body exuded a thick killing intent. In all of the northern Uzan region, there was only one person who could walk so close to Dusong Mengpoj, exude such a thick killing intent, and yet not make Dusong Mengpoj feel the slightest bit of concern, Dayan Mengpoj. In all of Uzan, the number of people who could be called great generals could be counted on one's fingers. Although Dayan Mengpoj was not a great general, he was publicly acknowledged by all of the Uzan Empire, including the Tsenpo and the Prime Minister, as the future Brigadier General. Although his strength could not compare to Dusong Mengpoj's, it was not too far off. The two great clans of the northern Uzan region, the Dayan clan and the Dusong clan, were both extremely ancient and powerful clans with deep roots in Uzan. In the Uzan language, Mengpoj referred to heroic spirit, heroic hero. To be able to obtain this title, one could easily imagine the strength of Dayan Mengpoj. To be able to ride a blood-hoofed divine steed from the Great Snow Mountain Temple and obtain the approval of the Great Snow Mountain Temple was enough to prove his strength. And in Uzan, anyone who could ride a blood-hoofed divine steed from the Great Snow Mountain Temple represented a special existence, slaughter. The blood-hoofed divine steed of the Great Snow Mountain Temple was only given to those existences with an extremely murderous nature. Dayan Mengpoj's path of life was somewhat different from Dusong Mengpoj's. He did not come from a traditional military background, and compared to fighting on the battlefield, Dayan Mengpoj was more skilled in assassination. Uzan was surrounded by many small kingdoms, Greater Balor, Lesser Balor, Shur Kingdom, Kong Kingdom, Tokaria, and many other kingdoms. Who knew how many famous generals of these small kingdoms had died at the hands of Dayan Mangpoj? In the western regions, Dayan Mangpoj had another name, the god of death. Ha, you can kill, and I'll take back the land for the Tsenpo and the empire. We can slaughter, and we can also conquer the world, so why not? Dusong Mangpoj said without turning his head. The Dusong clan and the Dayan clan could be considered friends, and Dusong Mangpoj and Dayan Mangpoj were also very familiar with each other. However, this was the first time the two of them had worked together. Because this time, the two of them had a reason to work together. Is the information reliable? Dayan Mangpoj rode his horse over and stood side by side with Dusong Mangpoj. Together, they looked down at the desert, the mountains, and the distant grasslands. His eyes slightly squinted, exuding an intimidating cold light. He was like a falcon, ready to strike at any moment. In his eyes, there were no opponents, only prey. Foman Linta oversees Chishi and is a crafty old fox. Back when he was overseeing the western regions, he used a scheme to wipe out an army of the Arabs. Moreover, Chishi has always been tightly guarded by him, so can it really be trusted that it suddenly loosens so much? No imperial great general is easy to deal with, and Foman Linta naturally isn't that simple. But this time, it shouldn't be fake. In the regional commander's incident, Foman Linta submitted a memorial requesting that that brat be executed. This matter has caused such a ruckus that the entire world knows about it. Now, that brat is advancing into Chishi and building a city in Wushang, right under Foman Linta's nose. This is a naked provocation. Given his stubborn personality, it would be strange if he could endure it. Chapter 729. Although Uzun had not been part of the drama taking place in Chishi in the northwest of the Tang dynasty, he had been paying close attention to it. Gao Xianji, Feng Changqing, Foman Linta, and Geshu Han of Longxi, along the long curved border between the Tang dynasty and the Uzun, three great generals of the Tang dynasty were garrisoned. Under normal circumstances, Uzun would not dare to act rashly unless he was fully prepared and had not brought enough troops with him. But when the brigadier general, the future 8th general of the Tang dynasty, came to the Tang dynasty, Uzun suddenly had a chance. In truth, Dusong Mangpoj and Dayan Mangpoj had smelled the bait and come over. And the person who spread the bait was Foman Linta. He's smart. Although I don't like being used by others, if it's that bastard. I don't mind being used. I believe that Senpo and the Prime Minister are the same. Dayan Mangpoj said. In a flash, the atmosphere became much quieter. Dusong Mangpoj's lips were tightly shut, and he said nothing. In the Uzun Empire, the name Wang Chong and the War of the Southwest had become a taboo. The plague that this youngest son of the Wang clan had spread on the Uzun plateau still hadn't ended. The hundreds of thousands of cavalrymen of the Uzun Ngari royal lineage had also been reduced to ashes in that battle. The 4 royal lineages had been reduced to 3, and the corpses of the hundreds of thousands of Uzun cavalrymen had contributed to that person's fame. Even the widely respected Prime Minister Daluan Ruozan of the Ngari royal lineage had been imprisoned by the Tsenpo because of that battle. In the history of the Uzun Empire, other than a few famous generals of the Tang dynasty, no one had ever been like Wang Chong, inflicting such damage on the Uzun Empire. But not even those famous generals would act like Wang Chong and spread the plague over the steppe. One could imagine just how much the Uzun generals hated Wang Chong. When they heard that Wang Chong was building a city in Wushang, only several hundred li from the northern edge of the Uzun plateau, Uzun knew that Foman Linta had deliberately spread the news. They had still been willing to take the bait. The Han have a saying, for a nobleman to take revenge, 10 years is not too long, but we Uzun cannot wait that long. The internal strife of the Tang people is an extremely rare opportunity for us. Geshu Han still doesn't know that I've come, so we can use this chance to completely eliminate that youngest son of the Wang clan. A threat must be strangled in the cradle. If that youngest son of the Wang clan is allowed to mature, he will become a mortal threat to our Uzun in just 2 or 3 years, and the Tang dynasty will truly gain an imperial great general. No matter what, we can't let him leave alive, and we can't let him use that city of steel as the core to repeat the events of the southwest. Dusong Mangpoj said, his expression grim. Dusong Mangpoj had been able to arrive so quickly because he wanted to eliminate Wang Chong and avenge the 200,000 soldiers of the Ngari royal lineage, but also because the Tsempo felt a deep unease. That youngest son of the Wang clan represented some sort of deep, most unpredictable variable. No one in Uzun believed that he had built a city of steel in Wushang just to manage his fief, based on the fact that he had built Lion City on the shores of the Arai. Get ready. Use this chance to kill him and avenge Daluan Ruozan and the others. As for Foman Linta, we still have to be on guard against that old fox. I will keep an eye on him. Dusong Mangpoj quickly turned his horse around and galloped back in the direction he had come from. He. Dayan Mangpoj looked down from the edge of the plateau, his horse gazing into the distance at the billowing smoke on the horizon. He gave an inexplicable sneer and quickly turned his horse around as well. One after the other, the two swiftly vanished into the distance. Wang Chong, what are you planning to do next? 10 days will be up very quickly. Are you really planning to retreat? Or are you going to completely fall out with him? Foman Linta is Qixi's protector general. On the steel walls, Bai Siling followed behind Wang Chong, her brows tightly furrowed. Ever since Foman Linta had left, Bai Siling had been in a constant state of unease and worry. Although she was infuriated by Foman Linta's actions and found them even more shameless, as an elite imperial great general and the highest commander of Qixi, his words could not be underestimated. There's no need to fall out. We've already completely fallen out. Wang Chong held his hands behind his back as he indifferently said. In contrast to Bai Siling's worries, Wang Chong seemed as if nothing had happened in the past few days, as if nothing had happened at all. I will never withdraw from Wushang, and he will never let me go. 10 days is just a formality, and he will never give me 10 days. Ah. Then why are you so calm? Bai Siling was at first startled, but when she glanced at Wang Chong's relaxed expression, she was instantly enraged. Ha, relax, he wouldn't dare to act recklessly. The Qixi Protector General can only manage Qixi, not my territory. And although I'm not in a hurry, how do you know that I haven't done anything? Wang Chong turned his head and said. A faint smile appeared on his lips as he saw Bai Siling's flustered and exasperated appearance. After spending so much time with Bai Siling, he sometimes found her flustered and exasperated appearance rather cute. Startled, Bai Siling was just about to ask what was going on when she heard the galloping of hooves. A horseman was galloping over from the north of the city of steel, and from the distance, she could hear a loud shout. Reporting. After passing through the gate, the horseman dismounted and quickly ascended the walls. Clasping his hands, he got down on one knee in front of Wang Chong. Marquis, according to your orders, your subordinate has finished his investigation and has come to report. How is it? Wang Chong held his hands behind his back. Reporting to Marquis. We've already investigated the Qixi Protectorate headquarters. Everything is normal there, and Lord Protector General has shown no signs of activity. The kneeling horseman said. Then what about the border between Qixi and Uzun? Wang Chong asked. Reporting to Marquis, the other brothers have already investigated. Everything seems normal there, but, the horseman hesitated, his eyes glancing at Bai Siling at Wang Chong's side. It's fine. You can say it directly. She's one of us. Wang Chong said. There was a rule in the army that any information concerning the military could not be easily divulged to people outside the army. Bai Siling's long dress clearly indicated that she was not a member of the army, so the horseman had some misgivings. Yes, Marquis. After a careful investigation, we discovered that the eastern side of the border between Qixi and the Uzun Plateau is normal, but the defenses on the western front are clearly much thinner, and the soldiers are not as concentrated. The horseman lowered his head and kneeled on the ground. The defenses on the western front, isn't that where our city of steel is? Foeman Linta is trying to divert the disaster to someone else, using a borrowed knife to kill. Wang Chong raised his head and muttered to himself. These words caused both the horseman and Bai Xiling to tremble in shock, especially the latter. She had been at Wang Chong's side this entire time, but even now, she had no idea when Wang Chong had made these arrangements. Wang Chong, you mean to say that Foeman Linta wants to borrow Uzun to deal with you? Bai Xiling blurted out. As she said those words, Bai Xiling's entire body turned cold, and her hands and feet trembled uncontrollably in panic. The mighty Qixi Protector General of the Tang dynasty, in order to deal with Wang Chong, had actually invited Uzun's people into his chambers. This was no different from defecting to the country. If news of this got out, it would cause a massive storm that would shake the entire court. It's not that he wants to, but that he can only do this. Although Qixi has a powerful army and a large number of soldiers, they are all soldiers of the Tang dynasty. If he uses Qixi's army to deal with me, he'll be digging his own grave. The risk is far too great, and His Majesty will never forgive him. Foeman Linta has made a name for himself in the army for many years, and his thoughts are meticulous. He would never leave behind such a flaw. Letting Uzun's people in and using a borrowed knife to kill is his only method. Wang Chong indifferently said, his eyes penetrating to the finest detail. Although Foeman Linta had come with a fierce momentum, Wang Chong was well aware that the trump cards he could use were rather limited. You may leave. Wang Chong quickly turned his head. Yes, Marquis. The horseman leaped down the walls and quickly left the inner circle. Sanyuan, have the people sent by the eagle arrived? Wang Chong suddenly asked. Replying to Marquis, they arrived an hour ago and are waiting for Marquis's summons and orders. A voice came from behind him. Wang Chong nodded and quickly left the walls. In a freshly constructed building within the city of steel, Wang Chong met with the disciple sent by the eagle. This was a youth of 14 or 15, his appearance ordinary and his skin coarse. In a crowd, he was the sort of person that would be easily forgotten. On his shoulder was a foot long the eagle. It had a sharp golden beak and 5 hook-like claws. For an eagle of this length and stature, it was rather small. Moreover, the eagle's eyes were not very sharp, and were even somewhat turbid, making it seem rather stupid. Paying respects to Marquis. Upon seeing Wang Chong, the youth quickly kneeled on the ground, a respectful expression on his face. You're the eagle's disciple. Wang Chong slightly creased his brow. He rarely interfered in the affairs of the eagle, but in the construction of the city in Wushang, there were many eagles and sparrows flying in the sky. Wang Chong had specifically requested that the eagle send someone over, and the eagle had quickly agreed, saying that it would send a disciple it was proud of. But Wang Chong had not expected that the disciple sent by the eagle would be a teenager, and the eagle on his shoulder was so unimpressive that it was hard to find anyone interested. But after spending so much time with the eagle, Wang Chong was confident that the eagle would not be so perfunctory as to brush him off on such an important matter. There had to be some sort of explanation for this. Yes, Marquis. This lowly one is an orphan that Master picked up in the capital. Later on, I stayed in Master's residence, learning how to raise birds. In the southwest, Master did not let me go, so Marquis never saw me. That's right, I also have a letter from Master. Please, Marquis, take a look. Once Marquis reads it, he will understand. The youth took out a letter from his bosom and respectfully offered it with both hands. Chapter 730. Wang Chong took the letter and began to read it suspiciously. At first, Wang Chong's brows were still tightly furrowed, but they gradually relaxed and the light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. Finally, he put down the letter and looked at the young man before him with a strange look in his eyes. The eagle had introduced his disciple in detail in this letter, and he held this ordinary-looking disciple in high esteem. He believed that this disciple would be able to inherit his legacy and help Wang Chong in Wushang. The eagle had especially mentioned in the letter that the people of the eagle were very different from what ordinary people would imagine, especially those who collected information. The more ordinary they looked, the better, and the less attention they attracted, the better. In this regard, the eagle's disciple fit the bill perfectly. Your master said that the eagle on your shoulder is completely different from ordinary eagles. It's a newly bred breed from a secret chamber, specially used to hunt and kill other falcons. Can you demonstrate it to me? Wang Chong said. He was a little curious. The eagle's previous birds were all bought from other eagle vendors, and then the eagle used his own special methods to cultivate them, turning them into the most outstanding and excellent falcons. But this time, it was different. The eagle had begun to cultivate some special breeds in a secret chamber, using his own methods to breed them. This had never happened before. Yes, Marquis. The young man responded and stood up from the ground. He turned his head to look at the eagle on his shoulder, and a startling light flashed in the young man's eyes. In that instant, the young man was like an unsheathed longsword, sharp and unforgettable. Even Wang Chong could not help but be slightly moved. Xiao Sha, attack! The young man stroked the eagle's back and suddenly let out a shrill cry. In that instant, the originally turbid and dispirited eagle's feathers quivered, and its eyes suddenly became incomparably sharp and intimidating. Wang Chong had seen many eagles, including the rock eagles of the western regions, the blue sea eagles of Goguryeo, and the eagles of the Turks, but he had never seen an eagle with such an intimidating gaze. It was even sharper than a sword. Screech! A metallic screech pierced through the void. The eagle shook its feathers and shot out like a sharp arrow. Boom! A large hole appeared in the opposite wall, and the golden silk nanmu boards that were as hard as iron were shattered into pieces. Countless claw marks could be seen on the surface, and each mark was several inches deep. It was as if someone was scratching tofu. Screech! Another shrill cry rang out. The eagle's iron wings shook, and as it flew back, it shattered another hard wall and landed on the young man's shoulder. As it retracted its wings and its eyelids drooped, the eagle returned to its turbid and dispirited appearance. It was like nothing had happened at all. Only the splinters of wood, the holes in the wall, and the deep claw marks were evidence of what had just happened. Not bad. Wang Chong praised, his eyes bright. At this moment, he finally understood why the eagle had sent him a disciple and eagle. You can leave. I need you to help me keep an eye on the border between Qixi and Uzan at all times. This is a map. In addition, I've already written down all the arrangements for you. As Wang Chong spoke, he took out a prepared map and a silk bag and handed it over. Yes, Marquis. The youth replied, took the bag with both hands, and quickly left. Time slowly passed, and night fell. The howling winds blew across the vast expanse of grass, sweeping the towering Uzan Plateau high into the sky. In the depths of the night, the stars were dim, and this was the time when everyone was asleep and most tired. Gallop! Suddenly, the earth began to tremble as the clopping of hooves came from the distance. At first, it was almost inaudible, but later, it began to rumble like thunder. With the help of the dim starlight, he could see thousands of cavalrymen in the darkness, and they were charging over like a tidal wave. These cavalry were fully armored and equipped with weapons, and all of them were silent, like demon gods walking out of the underworld. The oppressive atmosphere was stifling. They're here! A fierce shout came from the very front of the cavalry, a divine steed as white as snow, its hooves a crimson red like blood. On its back, the Uzan general raised an arm, his entire body exuding an aura as vast as the mountains and seas, causing even the space in a radius of several dozen zhang to twist and distort. His eyes were fixed forward, his expression as cold as ice. Up ahead is the territory of the Tang dynasty. The people of the Qixi Protectorate have already retreated, so it's time for us to move. Do you all understand tonight's mission? Yes. Everyone responded in unison as the wind blew and the grass moved. They were orderly as if they were a single person, and that kind of momentum was extremely shocking. Remember. Kill Wang Chong and destroy the City of Steel. Tonight will be the night when our Uzun takes revenge. The Uzun general pulled out his scimitar and howled as he took the lead and leaped down from the plateau. Nay! The thousands of Uzun highland steeds neighed fiercely, stirring up clouds of dust as they galloped through the starry night toward the City of Steel, their momentum unstoppable and unstoppable. The City of Steel was ablaze, the thousands of furnaces illuminating the sky as if it were day. Amidst the furnaces, tens of thousands of craftsmen were working on the walls, creating a scene of bustling activity. This place had already become the busiest and liveliest place in the western regions. Watch out for the crane. Teams 8 and 9, make sure to align the modules. Don't make any mistakes. Craftsmen, stand aside. Prepare to pour the molten iron. Countless craftsmen were walking on the walls, issuing orders. With the arrival of a new wave of steel and wall modules, the City of Steel was once more busy. Teams 2 and 3, go out and take a look. Why haven't the people from Team 4 returned from their patrol? While all the craftsmen were busy, the patrols outside the City of Steel were not idle. Ever since Fumeng Lingcha's army had arrived, the City of Steel had become even more heavily guarded at night than during the day, and the perimeter of the city had been expanded by several times. As long as anyone approached within 10 kilometers of the City of Steel would be warned in advance and make preparations. Milord, Team 4 is led by Zhang Shao. He's powerful and has always been cautious. There won't be any problems. Outside the city, a patrolling cavalry captain said in the flickering furnaces. These were all elites who had experienced the War of the Southwest and were more than capable of dealing with this sort of situation. But before the cavalry captain could finish speaking, a shrill scream suddenly came from the darkness. Ah! Careful, enemy attack! This voice was like a boulder crashing to the ground, instantly stirring up massive waves around the City of Steel. Boom! The tens of thousands of craftsmen on the walls of the City of Steel suddenly stopped, all of them nervously looking in the direction of the scream, the atmosphere deathly still. The area around the City of Steel had always been peaceful. Such a situation had never happened before. And the most disturbing thing was that even if they couldn't see anything, even if they didn't know anything, they could hear that it was a scream that could only be made when a person was on the verge of death. Careful! Everyone, get ready. The first to react were Qing Sanyuan and Su Shixian. The two of them interacted with all the patrols day and night, so they immediately recognized the voice of Team 4's Zhang Shao. Zhang Shao was no weakling. No one knew what had happened to his team, but one thing was certain, they had been ambushed. Rumble. Following Qing Sanyuan's and Su Shixuan's orders, the City of Steel's guards began to gather. In a few short moments, they had arranged themselves into neat ranks, brimming with killing intent and a tight defense. After experiencing the War of the Southwest, the cavalry under Wang Chang's command were far superior to ordinary cavalry in both quality and strength. Buzz! While Qing Sanyuan and Su Shixian were gathering the guards of the City of Steel, the craftsmen outside the city sensed the tense atmosphere and hurriedly fled back into the city, their faces pale. What's going on? On the walls, Bai Siling and Xiao Yadong were the first to leap onto the walls. Almost at the same time, a gust of wind whistled and another figure appeared beside him. Marquis. Seeing that person, everyone in the surroundings lowered their heads and bowed in greeting. That's Zhang Shao's voice. Wang Chong looked into the distance, his expression grave and his brow tightly furrowed. He clearly remembered every single person who had gone through life and death with him, and every single person he had brought to the City of Steel possessed extraordinary status. Yes, Marquis. According to custom, Zhang Shao should have gone to the north to patrol and stand guard, but he still hasn't returned. Lord Qing and Lord Su were just about to send someone to investigate when this happened. A guard on the walls said with his head lowered. Wang Chong said nothing, but his brow furrowed even tighter. All was calm in the distance. Other than that scream, nothing else could be heard. At this moment, Wang Chong had a very bad feeling. Zhang Shao had participated in the War of the Southwest with him. He was rich in experience, and there was no need to doubt his strength and skill. Wang Chong truly found it difficult to imagine just what sort of situation could cause his squad to be completely wiped out, with not a single one of them able to escape. Strangely, Wang Chong was standing on the walls, but he could not hear a single sound in the darkness. There were only two explanations for this situation. Either the entire city of steel had misheard, or the opponent this time was even more powerful than expected. The entire city of steel was silent, everyone looking in the direction from which the scream had come. Thump thump thump. Time slowly passed, and after some time, they suddenly heard a series of sounds. They were similar to the clopping of hooves, but also completely different, and much softer. In an instant, the atmosphere suddenly tensed up, and even the sound of breathing became softer. Cree. Just as everyone was waiting anxiously, an ear-piercing shriek entered their ears. It was a very thin sound, but it was also very sharp. It was a sound that no one had ever heard before. Upon hearing this sound, Wang Chong's face turned extremely grave. He seemed to think of something, but he found it very difficult to understand in such a short time. Look over there. Chapter 731. His words attracted everyone's attention. With the help of the dim starlight, everyone could clearly see something approaching from the distance. It was getting closer and closer. Slowly, from that blurry shadow, everyone could finally make out the silhouettes of the steel cavalry. Enemy attack. Prepare for battle. Several dozen zhang away, Cheng Sanyuan and Su Shixian stood at the very front of the army, their pupils constricting as they immediately unsheathed their swords. Clang clang clang. At the same time, hundreds and thousands of soldiers drew their swords at the same time. There were no clamorous slogans, nor did they charge with great fanfare. There were only countless swords that gleamed coldly under the dim starlight. After the tempering of steel and blood, this army was now extremely obedient and could be considered one of the most elite cavalry forces of the continent. Kill! Kill! In the distance, that army that had taken advantage of the darkness to launch a sneak attack finally stopped concealing itself. With a clear cry, thousands of soldiers unsheathed their scimitars and let out a heaven-shaking roar that seemed to tear apart the sky. Rumble. The earth quaked as thousands of warhorses suddenly accelerated, exploding with a mountainous aura as they charged toward the city of steel. But at this moment, through the light of the blazing furnaces, Wang Chong suddenly saw a white symbol on the warhorses of those mysterious cavalry. They were complex, white religious runes. Wang Chong paled at the sight of the white inscriptions on the horses. Cheng Sanyuan. Su Shixian. Retreat. This urgent shout was like a clap of thunder, causing everyone to jump in fright. Cheng Sanyuan and Su Shixian also turned their heads in astonishment. They had already prepared to attack, but none of them had expected Wang Chong to give the order to retreat. This is an order. Wang Chong clenched his teeth, his complexion ashen. His gaze was not on Cheng Sanyuan and Su Shixian, but on the cavalry charging at him like lightning bolts. The White Braves. As this thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind, his mind was in turmoil. At this moment, he finally recognized the meaning of those white religious runes. In the entire world, only one cavalry force would have these special white religious runes painted on the sides of their horses. Uzin's White Braves. Everyone in the world agreed that a cavalry charge was far more powerful than an infantry charge. And of all the cavalry, the Arab cavalry was the most formidable. And Uzin's White Braves were the only cavalry force that could compare to the elite Mamelukes. The Mamelukes had been equipped with the sharp woozy steel swords that could cut a hair. At Talas, they had made illustrious achievements in defeating the Tang dynasty. Afterward, they had marched into the western regions and swept through all the countries. As for the nearby Yusang Empire, it had become their target. When the Mamelukes reached the Uzun Plateau, the Uzun Empire had suffered grievous losses, its northern defense line almost completely pierced through, until they ran into Uzun's white braves. In that battle, 10,000 Mamelukes, equipped with Wuzi steel swords and capable of sweeping through hundreds of thousands of soldiers, had encountered the Uzun white braves with only 4,000 or 5,000 soldiers. The white braves had stubbornly resisted. Although the white braves had suffered grievous losses, the Mamelukes had also suffered nearly 5,000 casualties. This was an unprecedented wound. This was the greatest wound the Mamelukes had suffered since their eastern campaign, and in the end, the Arabian Empire had been forced to give up on its ambitions for the Uzun Plateau. One could easily imagine the strength of the white braves. Although the soldiers trained by Wang Chong were well trained and had experienced the bitter campaigns of the southwest, they were still far from being able to compare to the Mamelukes at their peak, much less the Uzun white braves that could contend with the Mamelukes. Each of the white braves of Uzun was at the profound martial realm, and they usually guarded the royal capital of Uzun. Unless there were major events, they rarely appeared, much less intervened in ordinary battles. Wang Chong had never expected that the famed and valiant white braves of Uzun would appear here, outside the City of Steel. Withdraw. Outside the City of Steel, Cheng Sanyuan clenched his teeth. Although he was unwilling, he still gave the order to retreat. Rumble. With an earth-shattering noise, the city gates opened, and all the troops retreated into the city like a receding tide. Where do you think you're going? Suddenly, a thunderous roar came from afar. Before the voice had died away, Xiao, an ear-piercing whistle suddenly came from the night sky. Before anyone could react, an arrow had already shot over from an extremely distant place. In the blink of an eye, it had already streaked through the layers of space, shooting towards the back of the neck of an elite horseman outside the city gate. This was an extremely accurate archery. This place was not protected by armor, so if one was hit, death was assured. Careful. Cheng Sanyuan's pupils constricted and his face paled. The arrow had been fired with incredible speed and without any warning. At the very least, this horseman had not noticed anything. Cheng Sanyuan unsheathed his sword and slashed down without hesitation. Hung, the long sword struck the tip of the arrow, and the arrow was violently shaken away. However, at the same time, a huge force came from the arrow, as if what he had struck was not an arrow, but a piece of solid ground. Kacha! A crisp sound rang out, and Cheng Sanyuan's arm went limp, immediately hanging down, motionless. At this moment, Cheng Sanyuan's expression finally changed. Hurry up, close the gate. Cheng Sanyuan shouted. Rumble. Each of the gates of the City of Steel was guarded by the most elite and well-trained soldiers. With Cheng Sanyuan's voice, the foot-thick gate of the City of Steel, weighing close to 10,000 jin, swiftly closed. Almost at the same time that the city gate was closed, a wave of arrows whistled through the air amidst ear-piercing sounds. The arrows landed on the heavy city gate by a hair's breadth, but were blocked by the heavy city gate. However, when the arrows hit the city gate, the sounds they made were like thunder, ringing in everyone's ears. At that moment, everyone's expression became extremely solemn. Wang Chong, who are these people? A voice sounded in her ears. Even though it was only the first wave, even Bai Siling could sense that something was amiss. Normal soldiers are definitely not this strong, and the enemy's general even wrapped the hooves of all the horses. These people definitely came prepared. Their strength far exceeds that of ordinary cavalry. Zhao Yudong sternly said. All warhorses had hooves nailed to their hooves, so when tens of thousands of cavalry charged, they created a heaven-shaking roar. But this cavalry had only made a sound when they got close to the City of Steel. This was not normal. There was only one explanation for this. The enemy had come prepared, their hooves wrapped in thick cloth. When the hooves landed on the cloth, they were buffered, so there was no sound. In a flash, everyone, including Zhao Yadong, turned to Wang Chong. Based on past customs, Qing Sanyuan and Su Shixian would have gathered all the guards and experts of the great clans in the face of such an attack and charged. But before the battle had even begun, Wang Chong had called them back. It was clear that Wang Chong had sensed something. "I'll tell you about this later. Those who come with ill intentions, those who come with good intentions. I can only tell you this. The opponent this time is even more formidable than we imagined." Wang Chong looked into the distance, his expression extremely solemn. Not many people in the Central Plains knew about the White Braves. If they knew too much, it would be a blow to their morale. This was not a good thing. Yu Sang has even mobilized the White Braves to deal with me. It seems like the matter of spreading the plague on the Tibetan plateau has already made me a thorn in their side. Even the Tsenpo has noticed me, Wang Chong thought to himself. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. The White Braves guarded the royal capital of Uzan. Without the Tsenpo's permission, they would never leave such a distant place and appear at the base of the City of Steel. Wang Chong could sense the thick scent of vengeance from the other party's actions, as well as a determination to kill him. Inexorably, the War of the Southwest had made him a thorn in the side of all the people of Yu Sang. This was not a good feeling. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Wang Chong's eyes regained their clarity and calmness. "Pass on my order. Prepare for battle." Wang Chong suddenly raised an arm and thrust it into the air. The atmosphere was tense, and all the craftsmen retreated back into the walls, not even daring to breathe too loudly. And on the walls, the experts of the great clans had their bows strapped to their backs and were aiming outside the city. Gallop. The galloping of hooves grew louder and louder, each step seeming to stomp on the hearts of the soldiers. The atmosphere grew more and more tense. The City of Steel was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Closer. Closer and closer. Rumble. With a deafening boom, a blazing furnace outside the city seemed to have been struck by an enormous monster. It tumbled and was sent flying high into the air. The sky was filled with sparks. With the help of the sparks, countless cavalry figures could be seen galloping over like demons from hell. Kill! In the blink of an eye, these horsemen had already charged around the City of Steel. Their eyes were incomparably ferocious. Every single one of them was like a primordial beast, emitting waves of tyrannical aura. Creak. The twanging of bowstrings could be heard from the walls as the clan experts lined up in a row, their bows drawn to the maximum, their arrowheads aimed at the Tibetan White Braves outside the city. Wait a moment. Wang Chong raised his right arm, and the twangs of the bowstrings came to a sudden halt. Now is not the time to strike. Everyone, wait for my order. Wang Chong's expression was extremely grim. If these Uzan cavalry were the same as the White Braves in his memories, then ordinary arrows would be useless against them. Chapter 732. The Uzan cavalry used thick and heavy plate armor, and the plate armor of the White Braves was especially tough and heavy. Not only that, the armor of the White Braves had been imbued with the greatest number of toughening inscriptions. This was also why they had been able to fight against the Abbasid Caliphate's Mamelukes. Swish! 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 On the walls, Wang Chong's men had chosen to restrain themselves, but the Uzan White Braves outside had chosen the exact opposite strategy. With an ear-piercing whistle, tens of thousands of arrows came whistling down like a tide, shooting toward the people on top of the city wall. At that moment, even space itself seemed to be tearing apart. Even Bai Siling grimaced at the sight of the long trails left behind by the arrows. Careful! Dodge! Loud shouts came from all over the walls as all the clan experts, including Bai Siling and Zhao Yadong, chose to dodge. The power contained in those arrows was so great that even they didn't have the confidence to block them. At this moment, the only person still standing on the walls, exposed to the rain of arrows, was Wang Chong. His expression was calm and emotionless. Boom! Hundreds of arrows pierced through the golden splitter mountain, exploding from every direction, enveloping Wang Chang's body. But when these arrows were still several zhang away, they were frozen in the air. Bzzz. Wang Chong blinked, and a cold light flashed through the darkness. In a flash, all the arrows were struck by some invisible energy and smashed to pieces, dropping to the ground. In that moment, even the roars of the white braves outside the city dimmed. On the walls, all the clan experts and the guards looked at Wang Chong with eyes brimming with worship. Wang Chong, unmoved in the rain of arrows, was like a god, holding the hearts of the people and becoming their pillar of support. Ready. Raise the secondary walls. Following a series of creaking sounds, thick, slanted steel plates quickly rose from the city walls. Once these steel plates were raised, they immediately protected everyone. At this moment, the White Braves' second wave of attack had arrived. In the gloomy darkness, 10 Sumuzan White Braves were dragging a long, silvery white object behind them. Using the high speed of their warhorses, they charged toward the tall gates of the City of Steel like shooting stars. Be careful. It's a siege all. A panicked shout came from the city wall. In that instant, everyone could clearly see that the tip of that silvery white object was incomparably sharp. It was shockingly a sharp siege awl that was 50 to 60 feet long. There were many complicated silver patterns on the surface of the siege awls. As long as one was in the military, they would not be unfamiliar with those silvery white patterns. They were densely packed and countless sharp runes. Everything that was engraved with such sharp runes was a top-notch siege weapon. Even a steel gate that was several feet thick would be pierced through. Bang! Before they had time to think, a heaven-shaking boom resounded in their ears. At that moment, the entire City of Steel trembled as if it had been struck by a shooting star. But before this sound had faded, the sound of galloping hooves came from outside the city. A second silver-white battering ram from the Great Snow Mountain Holy Temple arrived like a bolt of lightning. Boom! A second earth-shattering boom resounded in everyone's ears. Marquis! Su Shixian stared at Wang Chong, his face ghastly pale. If they continued to attack in this manner, the gates of the City of Steel wouldn't be able to hold out for long. At the start, he and Qing Sanyuan had been confused by Wang Chong's decision to have them retreat into the city. But now, even the slowest Su Shixian could sense that this wave of enemies was different from the ones he had faced before, completely different from cavalry. Because no cavalry would bring such siege awls when charging on the battlefield. This wave of enemies was far more formidable than he had imagined, and they had also come fully prepared. Don't worry about it. No matter what siege weapon they use, they won't be able to open the gates of the City of Steel. Wang Chang's voice was flat and indifferent, neither loud nor soft, but it had an intimidating power. The White Braves were almost invincible in a field charge. At the very least, the cavalry under his command were incapable of stopping them, but defending a city was a different matter. Wang Chong knew what Su Shixian was worried about, but that was impossible. The gates of the City of Steel were not made of ordinary steel, but of meteoric metal that Wang Chong had brought from overseas. No matter how many sharp runes the White Brave siege awls had been engraved on them, no matter how powerful their charge, they would never be able to break through a gate made of meteoric metal. Such a thing could never happen, and Wang Chong had engraved so many defensive and toughening runes on the gate. Uzun isn't involved in production, so he couldn't have forged something of this level. It seems like it came from the Great Snow Mountain Temple. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. Uzun had placed far more importance on him than he had expected, but no matter what they wanted to do, they were doomed to fail. The City of Steel was his life's work, his dream. In order to establish a foothold here, he had already made ample preparations. Not even Uzun's illustrious White Braves could break this city. Pass on my order. Tell Su Ke that he can begin his preparations. Wang Chong said. Yes, Marquis. A messenger quickly responded and left. Outside the City of Steel, the White Braves were still not done with their assault. Boom boom boom. Silver battering ram after battering ram slammed into the tall gate. At this moment, there was a clattering of metal as long 5-clawed hooks were thrown up from the walls and hooked onto the edge of the wall. Go! With a roar, hundreds of white braves jumped off their horses, their right hands gripping ropes as they used the hooks on the wall to scale the walls. Everyone, follow me. Hurry and stop them. Su Shixian grimaced and unsheathed his sword. He was the first to step out of the wall that had been blocking the volley of arrows and charge at the hooks. On the other side, the others also charged out, fully armored. The people outside the city were all incredibly powerful. If they were allowed to use their hooks to scale the walls and open the gates of the city of steel, then the more than 100,000 craftsmen in the city would be exposed to their iron hooves. The city of steel would suffer grievous casualties. Clang! Clang, clang. The long swords hacked at the 5-clawed hooks, splitting them into two. Without these hooks, the white braves began to drop to the ground. But before they could reach the ground, the white braves swung their right hands, and another set of hooks latched onto the top of the wall. These white braves immediately charged toward the top of the wall. Sir Zhang. As the Uzun's assault was at its most intense, Wang Chong glanced at the dense ranks of Uzun's white braves and suddenly turned to Zhang Shouji, who was being protected by several guards. It's about time to use the beehives. Zhang Shouji nodded and said nothing. He quickly turned and left, walking down the city wall. Although he was only skilled in city construction, Zhang Shouji had fought with Wang Chong in the War of the Southwest, so he wasn't completely ignorant of military affairs. These people were powerful, and as cavalry, they had brought siege awls and hooks that were rarely seen by cavalry. It was clear that these were no ordinary opponents. But regardless of who they were, they had clearly underestimated Wang Chong's confidence in building a city and his preparations. Buzz! As the hundreds of Uzun white braves reached the bottom of the wall and were using their hooks to scale it, no one noticed that around 15 meters from the ground, a dense network of holes had appeared on the wall. Within the holes, there were sharp arrows shining with cold light. Boom! Tens of thousands of arrows shot out like a torrent of locusts, engulfing all the Uzun white braves outside the wall. This sudden assault caught the Uzun white braves off guard. Ding ding ding! Countless arrows rained down on his body, but they were all blocked by his thick armor. However, there were more than tens of thousands of arrows raining down from the city walls, and there was no way to dodge at such a close distance. Poo, piu, piu, the arrows were pierced through the gaps in the dense rain of arrows, piercing through the necks and other areas. Bang, bang, bang. Caught off guard, 30 to 40 white braves dropped to the ground, their corpses strewn across the ground. The others also had their ropes cut and fell off the city wall. Not only that, but the rest of the Uzun white braves were also caught in the rain of arrows. Whoosh! 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 In the blink of an eye, 70 to 80 white braves were killed. Damn it! Be careful of the arrow rain, howls tore through the night sky. This volley of arrows was something none of the white braves had expected. Wang Chong's beehive had been set up perfectly, and there had been no warning at all. In the blink of an eye, more than 100 white braves had been killed or wounded. In a battle where tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of soldiers could be killed or wounded, this number was negligible. But to the white braves, who numbered only 5 or 6,000, this was no small number. Shields. Defense. The white braves' ferocity was on full display. In the face of this volley of arrows, not a single one of them retreated. In the dim light of the flames, the white braves suddenly stooped, their right hands reaching into the bellies of their horses. When they stood up, they were holding thick plates and shields. One shield after another was raised into the air, and in the blink of an eye, they had formed a massive defense beneath the walls of the city of steel. All the arrows struck these shields and were blocked. Everyone, hurry! Open the gates! Attack the city of steel! A white braves commander shouted, and as he spoke, more claws and hooks crossed the 40-some meters to strike the walls. Chapter 733. Boom! Boom! A few moments later, a boom attracted the attention of everyone on the wall. They turned their heads and saw that nearby, a part of the wall had been split open like a piece of paper. Next to the crack, several white braves with particularly powerful auras were crouched in a corner of the wall, constantly pushing the crack in. Metal element martial artists. On the wall, Qing Sanyuan's pupils constricted, his face paling. Wang Chang's city of steel was incredibly tough, but this was also the greatest problem. Once it encountered a powerful metal element ability user, the formidable city of steel would instantly become like a piece of paper. Someone aim there and immediately attack. Qing Sanyuan quickly called over a group of archers, but as the arrows fell, they were all blocked by the sturdy plate shields. The arrows were even disintegrated in the air before they could hit the ground. There were even a few arrows that were reflected back at the walls by the metal element ability users. No matter how sharp an arrow was, its power was greatly reduced in the face of a metal element ability user. Marquis. Qing Sanyuan's eyes widened, and he finally couldn't help but look at Wang Chong. The enemy had made far more preparations than he had imagined. If this continued, the Uzun wouldn't even need to open the city gates before they were punching holes in them. As the winds howled, Wang Chong stared motionlessly at the blazing furnace in the distance, as if he had heard nothing. Marquis, Marquis, Qing Sanyuan's heart thumped, and he couldn't help but call out. Don't worry about it. No matter how many metal element ability users they send, they won't be able to open it, at least not before daybreak. Wang Chang's indifferent voice rang out in his ear. His expression was calm, his eyes still looking forward. It seemed like he had not changed at all. Qing Sanyuan was stunned. Only now did he realize that although Wang Chong had not said anything, no change on the battlefield could escape his eyes. However, what surprised Qing Sanyuan the most was what Wang Chong said at the end. The strength of metal-type ability users was well known. Qing Sanyuan did not understand why Wang Chong was so confident that these people would not be able to break through the city wall. Yes, Marquis. Although he was puzzled, Qing Sanyuan still endured it. On the other side, Wang Chong was observant. He knew that Qing Sanyuan was puzzled, but he didn't explain. This city of steel had been constructed from gold. To outsiders, the amount of gold and silver spent on it was unimaginable. If anyone thought that this was just a city made of metal, they would be gravely mistaken. In the bottom layer of steel, Wang Chong had added too many large-scale defensive formations, fortification formations, and even rebound formations. Not only that, but Wang Chong had also added thousands of small formations inside. It was no exaggeration to say that this steel was even more valuable than gold. It was not impossible for metal-type martial artists to break through these walls, but the amount of time, energy, and price they would have to pay would be unimaginable. Just as Wang Chong had said, the enemy would not be able to break through the walls before daybreak, so Wang Chong wasn't worried at all. But right now, Wang Chong was thinking about something else. Something's wrong. Just what are you trying to do? Wang Chong narrowed his eyes as he looked into the distance. Cavalry was used to charge on the battlefield, not to attack a city. Even if they brought siege awls, ropes, and grappling hooks, it would still be the same. Since the enemy had come prepared and had even wrapped the hooves of their warhorses, they should understand that this method would not be able to break through the city gate. The question was, what was the enemy's goal? Or rather, where was the enemy's true target? Wang Chong was hailed as the greatest war saint in the history of the Central Plains. Even illustrious figures like Hushu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozan had been toyed around in the palm of his hand, let alone anyone else. No strategy could escape his eyes. Wang Chong knew that something was wrong here. Clang clang clang. The first batch of white braves had finally crossed the 40-some meters and scaled the wall, braving the rain of arrows. Rumble. Black war halos vibrated and flickered beneath their feet. Shockwaves exploded, and one of the city guards screamed in agony as he was sent flying in all directions like a kite with its string cut. The White Braves, hailed as the strongest cavalry of the Uzun, had finally revealed their powerful cultivation. Each of these White Braves was at Tier 1 or Tier 2 of the profound martial realm. Although the White Braves, trained in the secret arts of the Great Snow Mountain, could not compare to the profound martial realm commanders of the army, their strength was far superior to that of the elites of other armies. The various great clans had sent their best experts to construct the city, but they were no match for these powerful White Braves. Don't panic. Everyone, work together and attack. No. They're too strong. Ah! Screams filled the air as countless experts from the great clans charged forward. But in the face of these White Braves, who were as tall and powerful as profound martial experts, they were sent flying in the blink of an eye. Kail! Kail! Low Uzun roars resounded over the walls. These White Braves who guarded the Uzun capital and the Tsempo displayed their overwhelming strength, sending the guards on the walls flying like tigers in a flock of sheep. The fact that not a single one of the White Braves on the walls was a match for them caused everyone on the walls to pale. Just who are these people? They're just ordinary soldiers. How could they be so powerful? Everyone was deeply shocked by what they saw. In this period of time, they had all witnessed the extraordinary strength and training of the city guards. They were able to assemble in an extremely short amount of time. And when they walked, their backs were straight, each of them brimming with vigor. Those craftsmen who had been hiding in the city, believing themselves to be safe, were terrified by this sight. Seeing that the Uzun White Braves were about to charge down the walls and open the gates, the only one who could maintain his composure was Wang Chong. It's about time. Wang Chong said to himself as he stood on the walls. His expression was calm and confident. It seemed like there was nothing in the world that could move him, nothing that could surpass his expectations. Rumble. There was a deafening boom as a group of 20 to 30 black-armored warriors strode out from the walls. Their gazes were sharp and their auras were powerful, not one bit inferior to the White Braves. Ready. Attack. At the very front of the group was a middle-aged man of about 30 years of age, who seemed to be the leader. He pulled out a woozy steel sword that gleamed with a bone-chilling light. Clang clang clang. The woozy steel swords were unsheathed, their sharp tips slanting to the sky. Under the dim starlight, they formed a dense forest of swords. Boom! In the blink of an eye, 20 to 30 fully armored woozy steel warriors had formed into a formation and were charging at the White Braves on the walls. As they charged, halos of thorns descended from their bodies, transforming into rings of light beneath their feet that made these woozy steel warriors seem even more powerful. Bang! Stellar energy exploded and waves of chi roiled. In the blink of an eye, the two sides were locked in a fierce battle, the sounds of metal clanging and sparks flying in the air. The unstoppable White Braves were instantly stopped. Not only that, but they were also on par with them and wielding woozy steel swords that could cut through iron like mud. The White Braves were completely suppressed. In a flash, all the White Braves on the walls paled. Kill them. Su Kei's voice resounded over the walls, and as he spoke, the black-armored woozy steel warriors on the walls began to combine into a small three-man formation. Clang! The first strike cut off the enemy's left and right arms, while the second cut off their heads. Trembling, one White Brave after another collapsed onto the walls. On this trip to the City of Steel, Wang Chong had only brought 20 to 30 profound martial realm elites. Unlike the others, these were experts hand-picked from the army. Wang Chong had used the influence of the King of Song, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Xianyu Zhongtong, his father Wang Yan, and his grandfather Wang Jiuling in the army to select them. The forces led by Qing Sanyuan and Su Shixian were only the first line of defense. The walls of the City of Steel were the second line of defense, and Su Kei's forces were fully armed. They wore armor forged from meteoric metal and wielded the sharpest Wuzi steel swords, and all of them were at the profound martial realm or above. This was the third line of defense of the City of Steel. The terrain of Wushang was complex, and there were many factions around it. It was very difficult to say whether ordinary martial artists would come. If they encountered a sneak attack from an expert, they would need experts of the same level to deal with it. Su Kei's force had been formed for this purpose. Everyone, get ready. As more and more white braves climbed the walls, Cheng Sanyuan and Su Shishuan's pupils constricted and their bodies tensed up. Clang! With a furious roar, Cheng Sanyuan and the others unsheathed their swords. Forming groups of 6 or 7, they formed a simple battle formation and charged at the white braves. Thud thud thud. In the blink of an eye, the two sides were engaged in fierce combat. Although the white braves were individually powerful, they were far inferior to Cheng Sanyuan and Su Shixian in terms of teamwork and formations. Squelch! One sword after another pierced through the chink in their armor, stabbing into their flesh. In a flash, one white brave after another fell to the walls, their eyes wide open and their bodies twitching. In a one-on-one battle, none of Wang Chang's soldiers were a match for these white braves, but when they worked together, these white braves simply couldn't stop them. Moreover, the white braves were cavalry. Abandoning their warhorses and climbing the walls meant that they had given up their greatest advantage. Chapter 734. Everyone else, get out of the way. Ready. Fire. At the place where the battle on the walls was the most intense, several black-armored soldiers were kneeling on the ground, their swords drawn and pointing forward. Twang! The bowstring vibrated, and with a heaven-shaking boom, the air was pierced through. A long black arrow instantly crossed the distance of more than 300 zhang, piercing through a white brave who had just climbed up the wall. The enormous force of the arrow lifted him off the ground, over the wall, and into the depths of the night. Ballisti! Careful! On the walls, a tall and muscular white brave paled when he saw the massive machine behind the black-armored soldiers. On the battlefield, ballisti were always the greatest threat to cavalry. No matter how many hardening and defensive arrays the Uzun soldiers had added to their plate armor, they could not stop the nightmare of the battlefield, the ballisti. No one had expected Wang Chong to use these ballisti, which lacked variety and accuracy, on the walls of the walls. Unlike the open battlefield where two armies fought, the walls of the City of Steel were cramped and didn't have enough room to maneuver. Moreover, the 30-some zhang distance made it very difficult for the white braves to dodge the ballisti. Dodge! Careful! The white braves were all stunned. Although Wang Chong had only placed 4 ballisti on the walls, they were far more intimidating than any number of soldiers could ever hope to match. Being hit by a ballista meant certain death. All the white braves felt apprehensive and immediately felt their hands and feet bound, unable to move at all. Roar! Let me! I'll go kill them! A white brave roared in Uzun, his expression savage. He unsheathed his scimitar and leapt into the air, attempting to quickly change his trajectory and kill the black-armored soldiers while simultaneously destroying the ballisti. But this white brave elite had only moved a few dozen feet when a pitch-black ballista bolt pierced through his chest and sent his corpse crashing into the city wall nearly 100 zhang away. Next! Ready! The commander commanding the 4 ballisti had a steely expression, his face as calm as ever. After killing the white braves, he immediately reloaded the ballisti, adjusted the direction, and began a second volley. These soldiers operating the ballisti seemed ordinary, but they were actually elites that Wang Chong had selected from the Annan Protectorate. At the same time, Wang Chong was conducting a new round of ballisti experiments. The greatest flaw of a ballista was that it was straightforward and lacked variation, making it easy for an opponent to dodge. Moreover, the cost of producing a ballista bolt was extremely high, so Wang Chong decided to try something new. He would select soldiers with exceptional talent in operating ballistae and form squads to make up for the poor accuracy of the ballistae. At the same time, this outstanding ballista team would be able to maximize the power of the ballistae. From the looks of it, Wang Chang's experiment was clearly effective. But the only problem was that ballistae were weapons of war controlled by the imperial court. Wang Chong could make ballistae bolts in large quantities, but he could not casually make ballistae. Even these 4 ballistae had been something that Wang Chong had applied for through the King of Song's influence in the imperial court. Bang! Boom after boom resounded through the city of steel, echoing far into the night. Although only 4 ballistae had been transferred from the walls, under the control of the ballista teams, they were able to fire extremely quickly. The firing speed of these 4 ballistae was equivalent to 30 or 40 ballistae. The white braves on the walls were almost completely suppressed by the ballistae. Some of the white braves tried to use other soldiers as cover, but it was clear that they had underestimated the accuracy of these 4 ballista teams. Once the ballistae were calibrated, it didn't matter how they tried to hide, as long as they revealed the slightest opening, they would be hit. The appearance of these 4 ballistae instantly changed the course of the battle on the walls. Wonderful! I knew that Marquis would have a way. No wonder Marquis didn't move. He predicted this all along. Ha ha ha, Marquis's foresight is divine. Not even the Uzun and Mengshi Zhao are a match for him, so how could these enemies stop him? Ha, who was it just now that was trembling in fear? Within the walls, the 100,000 craftsmen had been silently watching the battle, and upon seeing this sight, they immediately calmed down. In this city of steel, Wang Chong was the greatest stabilizing force. Although they had been somewhat dissatisfied at the start with Wang Chong standing there motionlessly, they no longer had any doubts. In the distance, in the flickering light of the flames, Wang Chong stood with his back to the crowd, his robes flapping in the wind. At this moment, Wang Chong's back had become tall and imposing, like a heavy mountain range. A strategist can decide victory from 1,000 li away. Whether it's the southwest or the northwest, no matter what, as long as he wants to do it, nothing will ever escape his grasp. It's no wonder so many great clans of the capital want to form a relationship with him. Whether it's money or manpower, they're all willing to work for him. Because if we follow him, there's nothing we can't achieve. In the middle of the bustling city, in another place not far from the middle of the walls, no one noticed that Zhang Shouji was silently watching Wang Chong's back, his mind filled with emotion. Of all the craftsmen, he had been the first to follow Wang Chong, and he had followed him through life and death. Zhang Shouji had a rather good understanding of Wang Chong. However, the more he understood Wang Chong, the more sincere and respectful Zhang Shouji felt toward this youth of 16 or 17. The intelligence and decisiveness he displayed far exceeded his age. The more he interacted with him, the more he trusted him, and the more he wanted to follow and help him. On the walls, Wang Chong had no idea what the others were thinking. His thoughts on strategy far surpassed the battle before him. It's about time. Just where, Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. No matter how formidable the white braves were, using them to besiege a city was putting the cart before the horse. No matter how formidable they weren't enough to pose a true threat to Wang Chong. He was considering other things. Did I overestimate you? To think of using cloth to wrap a horse's hooves and a battering ram from the Great Snow Mountain Temple, you shouldn't be an ordinary opponent. Just what are you trying to do? Wang Chong frowned in thought. He was beginning to sense that something was wrong. Cling cling clang. With a metallic clatter, Wang Chong focused his eyes and saw hooks fly up from the walls and land in front of Wang Chong. In just a few moments, crimson-white braves had climbed up the walls. Seeing Wang Chong standing in front of them, these white braves immediately unsheathed their scimitars and furiously slashed at Wang Chong. Humph, you overestimate yourself. Wang Chong returned to his senses and sneered. Each of the white braves was an expert of the profound martial realm, and they were armed to the teeth with formidable defensive power. But even if they could fight against the valiant Mamelukes, they were like mantises trying to stop a chariot in front of him. Facing 7 or 8 crimson-eyed white braves wielding scimitars, Wang Chong didn't even move, allowing them to slash at him. Boom! 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 One white brave after another gripped their scimitars and slashed at Wang Chong with thunderous momentum. With the strength of these Uzun white braves, this full-strength slash could even cleave apart a mountain. But when they reached Wang Chong, when they were still several dozen feet away, it was like they had struck an invisible wall and were frozen in the air. What's going on? What evil art did this fellow use? Why can't I move my scimitar? Drawl, everyone, work together to kill him. He can't possibly deal with so many of us. The Uzun white braves were both shocked and infuriated. This was completely out of their expectations. Of all the battles they had participated in, this was the first time they had encountered such a situation. But what made them panic the most was the calm and indifferent voice they heard next. Is that so? These words were not spoken in the Han language, but in the Uzun language they were so familiar with. It's that Han. All the Uzun white braves stared in shock at Wang Chong. When Wang Chong raised his head and looked at them, all of them had a bad feeling. Run! Run! Someone suddenly shouted, but in the blink of an eye, all of them felt an intense sense of danger, their scalps going numb. Driven by their instincts, they wanted to abandon their scimitars and flee, but it was too late. Rumble. Wang Chong blinked his eyes, and in a flash of cold light, all the surrounding white braves were pulled toward Wang Chong by a powerful force. Careful! My stellar energy! He's absorbing our energy. Evil art! He knows evil arts. Ah! The most elite white braves of the Uzun Plateau were shocked, their eyes brimming with the deepest fear. In front of the great yin-yang heaven creation art, these white braves were all stiff and unable to move. The stellar energy in their bodies flowed like water from a broken dam, surging into Wang Chong's body. Not only that, even their incomparably tough armor, inscribed with countless defensive and hardened arrays, was constantly twisting, shrinking, collapsing, and deforming in front of Wang Chong's great yin-yang heaven creation art. Ah! With one final scream, the 8 Uzun white braves were compressed into a ball of flesh and blood, their armor crumbling to the ground around Wang Chong. Chapter 735. Seeking Your Own Death. Without even glancing at them, Wang Chong quickly regained his composure. At his current level of strength, not even ordinary Saint Martial experts were a match for him. If he had the chance, he could suck them dry of their energy, let alone these profound martial white braves. Wang Chong didn't even need to do anything for these white braves to die around him. With a wave of Wang Chong's sleeve, the corpses of the 8 white braves flew into the air, over the walls, and down below. Boom! Just when Wang Chong was turning his attention elsewhere, the situation suddenly changed. A massive boom came from within the city of steel, followed by screams. Ah! Not good. There's a spy. It's someone from Uzun. Save me. Save me. My leg. Run, run. The tranquil city was suddenly thrown into chaos. Screams, explosions, pleas, collisions, and shockwaves filled the air. In an instant, the atmosphere in the Battle of Steel suddenly changed. The situation that had been under control suddenly tensed up, and countless variables appeared. This is impossible. On the walls, the countless Tang dynasty soldiers trembled in fear as they stared in shock at the source of the screams. And Wang Chong suddenly turned around. For a moment, the entire top of the city wall was silent, deathly silent. Even the black-armored soldiers controlling the ballistae couldn't help but turn around in shock. In the entire Wuxiang region, the city of steel was the most heavily guarded, and the inner city was the most heavily guarded. All the craftsmen involved in the construction of the city were Han, and know who were recruited. Moreover, their backgrounds had all been recorded in the Bureau of Revenue. This was done through the descendants of the great clans who held official positions in the Bureau of Revenue. Moreover, all the craftsmen were managed by foremen, and above the foremen were foremen, and above the foremen were foremen. Layer by layer, it was impossible for an outsider to step in. And outside the city of steel, there were several thousand cavalry and guards standing guard, all of them on guard from 10 li away. It could be said that in the entire western regions, although Wangchang's city of steel had many people, it was the most difficult place to sneak into. Moreover, the Uzun looked completely different from the Han. Even the white braves, who were relatively tall among the Uzun, looked very different from the Han. Just the redness of the plateau on their faces was not so easy to get rid of. This wasn't something that could be impersonated just by having an average height. No one knew how these Uzun people managed to sneak in. Over there. At this moment, the calmest person was none other than Wang Chong. After his initial surprise, Wang Chong seemed to have found the answer to all his questions, and he suddenly understood. From the very start, Wang Chong had never been able to understand a single question. Why were these people so confident that they could break the city of steel? Were they relying on these battering rams and 5-clawed hooks? Attacking and defending a city was completely different from fighting in the field, and there was no meaning in their actions. Only when he heard the screams from within the city did Wang Chong suddenly understand. The opponent this time was far more difficult to deal with than he had imagined, and far more frightening. Although he didn't know how the opponent had done it, there was no doubt that they had bypassed the layers of checks and had even managed to overcome the difference in appearance to infiltrate the city of steel. These spies hidden within the city were the true trump cards of the opponent. I really want to know more and more just who are the attackers this time. Wang Chong quietly said to himself, a cold and harsh light flashing through his eyes. He had encountered quite a few famous Uzun generals, whether it was Tumi Sangza, Long Qinba, or Jiao Sero, or the higher-ranking generals like Hushu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozan. He knew the style of these Uzun generals like the back of his hand. But this Uzun general's style was completely different. Whether it was the hooves, feints, plate armor, shields, metal element martial artists, 5-clawed hooks, battering rams, or the spies within the city, or how to use the darkness to evade the surveillance of the eagles, his style was completely different from any other Uzun general that Wang Chong had encountered. This style was completely different from the straightforward Uzun people, and he was even more cunning than a well-read general of the Central Plains. Not even the fox of the battlefield, Yao Guangyi, could compare to him. In Wang Chong's memories, there were very few Uzun generals who were as difficult to deal with as this one. But the urgent task at hand was to resolve the chaos in the city. Otherwise, with so many of the craftsmen in the city powerless to resist, they would be massacred, and the gates of the city of steel might really be breached. Buzz! With no time to think, Wang Chong flew off the walls. But the moment Wang Chong flew off, he felt a strange sensation coming from behind him. At first, it was just a feeling of wheat, but in the blink of an eye, this feeling of wheat rapidly expanded, ultimately becoming as intense as a storm. He, I've caught you, a faint sneer came from the side of his ear, like the teasing of the Grim Reaper. Although he couldn't see anything, Wang Chong felt an intense sense of danger. Not good. Wang Chong grimaced. His opponent had been hiding here for some time, restraining his aura and lying in wait like a viper. Only when Wang Chong had been drawn away by the disturbance in the distance and revealed an opening did he suddenly strike. And his first move had been a fatal one. From his reincarnation until now, this could be said to be the most sinister, most vicious, and most fatal opponent Wang Chong had ever encountered. Bang! With no time to think, a massive wave of stellar energy erupted from Wang Chong's body. Wang Chong pushed the great yin-yang heaven creation art to its limit. One yin and one yang, one sun and one moon, two phantoms appeared on Wang Chong's left and right shoulders. Boom! A sharp and destructive bolt of energy swept through Wang Chong's original position like an arrow, traveling several hundred zhang. The majestic energy stirred the air, stirring up a fierce gale in a radius of 100 zhang around the city gate. The strong astral winds crashed against the city gate, causing the steel gate to emit rumbling sounds, causing people to tremble in fear. On the other side, after Wang Chong had dodged this attack by a hair, he turned his head in shock to see this scene. "Kid, your reaction isn't bad. You actually managed to dodge this attack." Not far from Wang Chong's original position, a tall, muscular, and wild black silhouette stood there like a god, his right hand gripping a red-black spear that was more than 1 zhang long and as thick as a child's arm. His gaze was cold and aloof, brimming with disdain. It was as if there was nothing in this world that was worthy of his attention, and nothing that could compare to him. But the most frightening thing was the wild, brutal, and murderous aura he exuded. It was as if his existence was to destroy everything in the world. Wang Chong had seen his fair share of experts, but he had never seen such a savage, terrifying, and crazed expert brimming with the desire to kill and destroy. Who is this person? Wang Chong's expression was solemn as he looked at the crazy man in front of him. This person's craftiness, treachery, resourcefulness in the art of war, wisdom, forbearance, concealment, and the strong murderous aura that had been cultivated from mountains of corpses and seas of blood had completely overturned Wang Chong's traditional impression of Uzun's generals and experts. It was enough to leave a deep impression on anyone who saw this person, and they would never be able to forget it. A powerful enemy. An absolutely powerful enemy. Wang Chong knew that he had probably encountered an extremely terrifying opponent in the northwest this time. But this powerful enemy, Wang Chong, had no impression of him at all. Something was wrong. As his eyes flitted over the strange dark red spear in the man's right hand that seemed capable of piercing the heavens, Wang Chong's eyes widened as he suddenly thought of a certain person. The northwest was a complicated place. The Uzun, the Tang dynasty, the Western Turks, the kingdoms of the western regions, the Abbasid Caliphate, Karak-Spazinu, Sindhu, all these factions intersected, and fierce battles broke out every month. Although it wasn't too difficult to determine a person based on their murderous aura, it wasn't too easy either. But if this person was also wielding a dark red demonic spear that was rarely used in the western regions, then determining this person's identity wouldn't be too difficult. At the very least, Wang Chong quickly thought of a person. It's him. Wang Chong's eyes widened, and his expression turned extremely grave. Murderous, cunning, difficult to deal with, skilled in the art of war, a member of the Uzun, a dark red spear. When all this information was put together, the name of a certain person leapt to the surface of Wang Chong's mind. Dian Mengpoj. He was a brigadier general of the Uzun Empire and a famous great general in the later years of the Uzun Empire. His reputation had once surpassed that of traditional Uzun great generals like Dusong Mengpoj and Huishu Wuzong, and he had even surpassed the king of Uzun great generals, Huitadra Konglo. He was hailed as the successor to Huitadra Konglo. This person had once been the greatest threat to the late Tang, because he was crazy, dangerous, and bloodthirsty, but he was also extremely intelligent. Most importantly, his thinking was so erratic that it was impossible to judge him with normal logic. His bloodthirst and madness made it so that he would do things that normal people would not do, regardless of the cost. And it was also because he was extremely intelligent that every time he attacked, he would cause enormous trouble, threat, and harm to his opponents. He had fought the Turks, he had fought the Arabs, he had fought Karak-Spazinu, he had fought Sindhu, he had fought the Tang dynasty. The list of countries he had attacked was very, very long. Sometimes, he would even cross a country to attack another. In the later years of the Northwest, if not for the otherworldly invaders, this Dian Mengpoj would have been the person that all sides wanted to eliminate the most. But this was not the only reason that Wang Chong had an impression of him. It was because Wang Chong clearly remembered that Dian Mengpoj had been one of the two pivotal figures in the Qixi Protectorate's lack of soldiers. And the white braves that Uzun was renowned for were precisely one of the armies under his command. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.